Chapter 2353. The ninth young master was dumbfounded as he watched Yi Xian devour the chaotic black flames. The chaotic black flames were the most evil thing in the world, and even the fan in his hand couldn't resist its corrosion. But now, Yi Xian had resisted it. Moreover, he was devouring it. Devouring the chaotic black flames? The ninth young master was completely dumbfounded. He looked at Yi Xian with disbelief because the scene before him had exceeded his expectations. He hadn't expected that someone in this world could devour the chaotic black flames. It was simply absurd. Meanwhile, Yi Xian was devouring the chaotic black flames madly. No, it should be said that his armor was devouring the chaotic black flames. As for the chaotic black flames, they couldn't resist at all. Most importantly, even though Yi Xian was enveloped by the chaotic black flames, he was completely unharmed. The ninth young master's eyes were filled with disbelief. Impossible. How could this be possible? Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his head, and then he opened his palms and two flaming swords appeared in his hands. Flaming swords that were condensed from the chaotic black flames. One was extremely evil while the other was extremely evil. A moment later, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. "Thank you, ninth young master." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly shot into the sky. The ninth young master's pupils constricted, and he suddenly waved his fan. A ray of white light surged out from the fan, and the image of a heavenly beast could be seen within the ray of white light. Bang! Suddenly, the ray of white light was instantly blasted apart, and then a shrill cry resounded. The ninth young master was pushed over 30 kilometers back, and the folding fan in his hand had actually started to burn when he stopped moving. The ninth young master was horrified, and he hurriedly let go of the fan. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the burning fan flew into his grasp. He wiped the chaotic black flames with his right hand, and then the fan gradually started to heal itself. Yi Xian sized up the fan, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Even though the fan was inferior to the chaotic black flames, it was still a divine artifact. Previously, he had suffered greatly from this fan. Yi Xian immediately put away the fan. Seeing this scene, the ninth young master's face instantly became incomparably unsightly. Yi Xian looked at the ninth young master and smiled, again. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. Chi. Two rays of light flashed through the battlefield. His speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the ninth young master, not giving him any chance to escape. A trace of malevolence flashed in the ninth young master's eyes. He abruptly raised both of his hands. In an instant, countless rays of golden light gushed out from his body. In the end, these rays of golden light enveloped him like a golden bell. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword arrived. Boom! The golden bell shook violently, and the ninth young master spat out a mouthful of blood essence. Obviously, his defensive artifact was very different from Yi Xian's battle armor. It should be known that Yi Xian's battle armor could block almost all kinds of power. On the other hand, the ninth young master's defensive artifact was clearly only able to block a portion of the power. Right at this moment, the ninth young master's pupils constricted because he noticed that his golden bell was actually gradually vanishing. It couldn't block the chaotic flames. Yi Xian glanced at the chaotic flames, and he was slightly shocked. Isn't this flame a little too formidable? As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian sighed in his heart as he gazed at Dedeabi on his waist. This Dedeabi is simply lowering his status. It's too lowering. As if he knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Dedeabi's voice resounded abruptly, "It has nothing to do with me. It's you." Yi Xian spoke indifferently, "I know. It's my problem. I'm unable to bring forth your full strength." Dedeabi was speechless. Yi Xian spoke again, "Brother Bai, it's not that I'm complaining about you. Think about it, I can't break other people's folding fan with you, but I can easily break other people's folding fan with this flame. Tell me, Isn't it a little embarrassing for you? Brother Bai, tell me honestly, are you at your limit? Are you unable to keep up with my rhythm? De Daobi was silent. Yi Xian sighed again. Brother Bai, you previously told me that you're invincible as long as the ancient characters don't appear. Tell me honestly, are you also acting like I am? De Daobi was speechless. Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but at this time, De Daobi on his waist suddenly trembled. The next moment, on the tip of De Daobi's pen, there was an additional drop of black liquid. Yi Xian was a little surprised. Brother Bai, this is? De Daobi said indifferently, ink. Yi Xian frowned slightly. A drop of ink? De Daobi said, use it now. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then waved his pen. Chi! A black pen suddenly slashed out. Boom! The golden bell that was being corroded by the chaotic black flames suddenly shattered. In the next moment, the ninth young master was blasted hundreds of thousands of meters away by the tip of the brush, and by the time he stopped moving, an area of tens of millions of kilometers had been obliterated. Yi Xian was stunned. The ninth young master was also stunned. At this moment, he no longer had a physical body, only an illusory soul. Yi Xian looked at the surrounding darkness, his hands slightly trembling. This De Daobi is something. At this time, De Daobi suddenly said, Young Master Yi, I told you before, among the divine objects in the universe, except for the divine books and ancient characters, there really is nothing that can compete with me, including the green profound sword, Shao Ta, and the fire on your body. This fire is trash in my eyes. If it was in front of my body, it would immediately kneel to me. So, I am really very powerful, don't always doubt my ability, really, sometimes I am very angry, if it wasn't for your sister, I... At this point, it suddenly stopped. Yi Xian asked, if it wasn't for my sister, what would you do? After a moment of silence, De Daobi said, nothing, I just want to explain to you that I am really not weak, that's all. Yi Xian said seriously, Brother Bai, I know you are not weak, but you have to let me feel it. You have to show it. If you don't show it, who will know that you are not weak? After saying that, he picked up De Daobi and said, Brother Bai, more ink. He found that after the brush, he found that there was no ink on the tip. De Daobi said in a deep voice, there is no ink. Yi Xian slightly frowned, Brother Bai, why are you so stingy? You are not willing to give even a little ink. De Daobi smiled bitterly, it's not that I don't want to give, but this ink. At this point, it did not continue. Yi Xian frowned and was about to say something. At this time, the ninth young master suddenly said, just now, that. De Daobi? Yi Xian looked at the ninth young master. At this moment, the ninth young master's soul was like a wisp of smoke. This guy is going to be completely erased. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the ninth young master's storage ring flew into his hand. He glanced at it, the corner of his mouth slightly raised, and then he put away the storage ring. He looked at the ninth young master, why didn't that old man save you? He found that Apotheon Mu did not make a move until now, which was somewhat abnormal. The ninth young master smiled slightly, he knows that I am hopeless. So, he gave up on me. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then said, Ninth young master, among the younger generation of your family, what kind of existence are you? After a moment of silence, the ninth young master said, there are two people who are better than me. Yi Xian asked again, are you personally targeting me, or is your family targeting me? The ninth young master chuckled, is there a difference? Yi Xian nodded, there is a difference. The ninth young master said lightly, it is me personally targeting you, but soon it will be my family targeting you. Yi Xian was puzzled, why? The ninth young master stared at Yi Xian, you killed me. And I am also one of the candidates to compete for the position of prince in my family. Behind me, I also represent a force. Now that I have died in your hands, they will not let this matter rest, nor will my family. The aristocratic families care about face the most, so they will definitely avenge me. Moreover, the Primal Chaos Black Flame and Firmament Imperial Fan were seized by you. These two divine objects belong to my family, so they will definitely take them back. Yi Xian nodded. In other words, they will come again, right? The ninth young master nodded. Yes. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Do you want to live? The ninth young master was stunned. Yi Xian smiled slightly. I have a soul-nurturing pill here, 200 million Yen vein pills. If you want to live, I can sell it to you, 200 million. The ninth young master was stunned, and then he flew into a rage. You are robbing me. Yi Xian shrugged, turned around, and left. The ninth young master hurriedly said, I will buy it. I will buy it. Yi Xian turned around to look at the ninth young master. Give me the money now. The ninth young master's expression became a bit ugly. My spatial ring is on you, how can I buy it? Yi Xian smiled. Have your family send it over. I believe that the ninth young master should be able to get 200 million Yen vein pills. Of course, you can also notify your family and have them come kill me. The ninth young master fell silent. Yi Xian smiled. If you hesitate, you will be completely gone. The ninth young master said in a deep voice, I will buy it. Yi Xian nodded, opened his palm, and a pill slowly floated in front of the ninth young master. The ninth young master quickly swallowed it. After swallowing the pill, the ninth young master's soul instantly stabilized, but at this time, a wisp of sword light suddenly locked onto his soul. The ninth young master looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, immediately get your family to bring the money. The ninth young master glanced at Yi Xian, then opened his palm. A token suddenly soared into the sky, and soon, the token disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian glanced at the horizon, and then he said with a smile, Ninth young master, 200 million universe veins to buy a life, you've earned it. Young Master Jiu looked at Yi Xian. Are you sure you won't kill me? Yi Xian said seriously, am I such a bad person in your heart? As soon as he finished speaking, he took out an ancient book and said, I'm a scholar. The ninth young master glanced at the ancient book in Yi Xian's hands and frowned, 36 yin yang skills? What kind of sage book is this? Yi Xian hurriedly put it away, feeling a little embarrassed. Oh no. I took the wrong one. P.S. It's almost the 15th, prepare to drink. Alcohol boosts your courage. Do you know what I'm going to do? 7017K. Chapter 2354. Yi Xian hurriedly put away the sage book, and then he looked at the ninth young master. How long will it take for your family to arrive? The ninth young master glanced at Yi Xian, right away. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Even though he had Qin Guan's 1.2 billion universe veins, he still had to pay it back. A person had to have a bottom line. Otherwise, he would really become a scoundrel. After all, Qin Guan didn't owe him anything. In the distance, the ninth young master looked at Yi Xian in silence. He wasn't sure if Yi Xian would really let him go, but he had no choice at this moment. He could only trust Yi Xian. 200 million universe veins. This was a huge sum to him. After all, he wasn't a prince. However, he could still raise it. In the distance, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground with his eyes closed. Cultivate. His cultivation had stabilized, and once he obtained the 200 million universe veins, he would start charging into the ancient god realm. Right at this moment, the starry sky in the distance suddenly split open, and then an old man walked out. Bang! Along with the appearance of this old man, everything in the surroundings actually became illusory. Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked at the old man. This old man was similar to Apotheon Mu from before, an expert above the ancient god realm. The ninth young master bowed slightly when he saw the old man, third uncle. The old man glanced at the ninth young master, and then he looked at Yi Xian. You want 200 million universe veins? Yi Xian nodded. The old man chuckled, interesting, truly interesting. Someone actually dared to threaten my clan. How interesting. Yi Xian frowned when he heard this. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, "Let him go, right now." Yi Xian turned to look at the ninth young master, and the ninth young master's expression was slightly unsightly. "Third uncle, give him the money first." He knew Yi Xian's temper better than Dao Yi. This fellow was simply a rash fool. What couldn't a rash fool do? However, the elder did not seem to mind. He looked at Yi Xian and sneered, "Kill you? Even if he had 10,000 guts, would he dare?" Hearing this, the ninth young master's face darkened. "Second uncle, give him the money first, then we'll talk." The old man frowned. "Little nine, when did you become so timid? With third uncle here, let's see if he dares to kill you." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "Come, try and kill him." Ninth young master was speechless. Yi Xian was silent. The old man mocked, "What, you don't dare?" Yi Xian looked at the ninth young master and sighed, "Farewell, ninth young master." Ninth young master still wanted to speak, but the sword light within his body suddenly exploded. Boom! The ninth young master's soul was completely destroyed, and he was completely erased. Ninth young master was speechless. The old man was also dumbfounded. He really killed him? He really killed him? Yi Xian looked at the old man and shrugged, "You seem very surprised." The old man was furious. He pointed at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, "Do you know who he is?" Yi Xian said, "Ninth young master." The old man said angrily, "And?" Yi Xian shook his head, "I don't know. He didn't tell me either." The old man's face instantly turned pale. "I thought you knew." The reason why he was so arrogant just now was because he felt that Yi Xian definitely knew about the ninth young master's background. Therefore, he was confident that Yi Xian would not dare to kill the ninth young master. However, he did not expect that Yi Xian did not know. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Where did you come from? I'm a little curious." The old man roared, "Brat, how dare you kill someone from my clan? How dare you?" Yi Xian frowned slightly, "I don't know about your clan. I've never heard of it before. Is it very powerful? If you are powerful, you should have told me. If you don't tell me, how would I know how powerful you are?" The old man's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "You don't even know about my clan. You..." Yi Xian suddenly looked behind the old man and was shocked. F***ck, what is that? It's flying. The old man frowned slightly and subconsciously turned his head. The moment he turned his head, his expression suddenly changed. He turned his head violently and a sword light slashed towards him. Boom! All of a sudden, the old man was sent retreating. In the process, close to 1,000 sword lights came slashing at him one after another. Rumble. In an instant, the old man was forced to retreat by these sword lights. He retreated hundreds of thousands of feet. Boom! Right at this moment, an enormous palm suddenly erupted from the sword lights. In an instant, countless rays of sword lights were pushed back while the old man appeared over 30 kilometers away. At this moment, the old man's expression was extremely unsightly. There were a few dozen scars all over his body, and every single one of them was so deep that his bones could be seen. Yi Xian said in his heart, "What a pity." He'd caught the old man off guard, but he still wasn't able to kill the old man. However, he'd obtained an unexpected gain. Even though the old man was a realm higher than the ninth young master, it seemed like the old man's strength wasn't any stronger than the ninth young master. Obviously, even though the ninth young master was only at the ancient god realm, he relied on those treasures, and his combat strength wasn't inferior to experts above the ancient god realm. When he thought up to this point, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly, and he gazed at the old man. Suddenly, the old man roared furiously and leaped up. In the next moment, he opened his right hand and clenched it into a fist. After that, he smashed his fist towards Yi Xian. Rumble. Suddenly, the starry sky trembled as a terrifying fist swept down. The fist emanated raging flames, and it was like a falling meteor that carried monstrous might. Yi Xian's expression was calm. He suddenly opened his palm, and then 2 flaming swords shot into the sky. The chaotic flames. Rumble. When the 2 swords slashed against the fist shattered into pieces, and it transformed into flames that shot towards the surroundings. The old man's eyes were filled with astonishment. The chaotic flames. You actually seized the chaotic flames. Yi Xian nodded. The old man's expression was ferocious. Do you know that the chaotic flames are a divine artifact of my sect? How dare you kill members of my sect and seize the divine artifact of my sect? Yi Xian suddenly interrupted the old man. All of you want to kill me. Tell me, what should I do? Should I just stand there and let all of you kill me? That's impossible. Don't you think so? The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You're done for. You're done for. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly turned around and vanished into the depths of the starry sky. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, You're not going to fight anymore? The old man didn't reply, and he'd vanished completely. When he saw the chaotic flames, he knew that he couldn't do anything to this young man. On the contrary, this young man might even kill him. The might of the chaotic flames was too terrifying. It could even corrode a supreme divine artifact, let alone his physical body. Therefore, he chose to leave decisively. This young man wasn't someone he could deal with, so it was better to flee first. In the starry sky, Yi Xian was slightly surprised as he watched the old man flee. He really hadn't expected that the old man would flee just like that. Without thinking too much about it, Yi Xian turned around and left. When Yi Xian returned to the celestial treasure pavilion, Fu Yi and Xiaolan instantly heaved sighs of relief. They hadn't followed him earlier because Yi Xian had asked them to guard the celestial treasure city. During this period of time, they'd been extremely anxious. Fortunately, Yi Xian had returned alive. Yi Xian glanced at them and smiled, It's fine. But they'll probably come again. When he spoke up to hear, he felt helpless. It was like beating the young, and then the old came. But it was good because it gave him time to grow. He was lacking time now. After a short while, Yi Xian arrived at the expanse of the starry sky where he cultivated, and he sat cross-legged on the ground. He had to attain the ancient god realm. This time, he wanted his strength to be able to keep up with the strength of his enemies. Why was he always beaten up in the past? It was because his strength couldn't keep up with the changes in his enemies. He couldn't let such a thing happen again. The days of being beaten up would be gone forever. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian opened his palm, and a spatial ring appeared in his hand. It was the spatial ring of the 9th young master. There were an entire 50 million universe veins in this spatial ring. Besides that, there were some divine artifacts. However, the most formidable divine artifacts were the god-ruling fan and the chaotic flames. As for the rest of the divine artifacts, although he didn't need them, he could take them to the Guanxian Academy, which could greatly enhance the overall strength of the Guanxian Academy. He originally had 60 million universe veins, plus Qin Guan's 1.2 billion universe veins and the 50 million universe veins now, it was 1.301 billion. However, when he cultivated the sword skill previously, he spent a total of 100 million universe veins. 100 million universe veins. Thinking of this, Yi Xian felt a bit of heartache. The sword skill that his father gave him was strong, but it was too expensive. But there was no other way. No matter how expensive it was, he had to cultivate it to the extreme. After all, this was his strongest trump card at the moment. Yi Xian collected his thoughts, then looked at the folding fan in his hand. He had to admit that this folding fan was indeed a bit fierce. It could be used to show off, and when necessary, he could give it to a girl. Yi Xian put away the fan, then opened his palm, and 2 balls of flames appeared in his hand. After these 2 balls of flames were swallowed by the armor, Yi Xian didn't let the armor destroy them. Instead, he subdued them. Now, these two balls of flames were at his disposal. Needless to say, these flames were very terrifying. If he didn't have the armor, he wouldn't dare to get close to this thing. Ordinary strength couldn't resist the chaotic black flames at all. Great harvest. Yi Xian chuckled, and then he put away the chaotic black souls. After that, he activated Dedeabi, and with the help of Dedeabi, he directly arrived at the ancient god realm. Bang! When his cultivation advanced to the ancient god realm, the aura around Yi Xian suddenly skyrocketed. Yi Xian took a deep breath greedily. He spread his hands, and a terrifying aura swept out from his body. In an instant, the entire galaxy boiled. Yi Xian opened his eyes, and they were filled with excitement. Power. After he reached the ancient god realm, he felt that his strength had increased several times. Needless to say, this kind of growth was very intoxicating. Of course, he wouldn't indulge in it. Because he only had this kind of power with the help of Dedeabi. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian calmed himself down and began to feel this incomparably mysterious ancient god realm. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian slightly frowned. The power of faith? He realized that the core of this so-called ancient god realm was actually the power of faith. 7017K. Chapter 2355. The ancient god realm. It referred to the godly position. After obtaining the godly position, one would obtain the power of faith. The power of faith was divided into many types. There were the power of faith of others and the power of faith of oneself. In other words, one believed in oneself. Most experts took this path and believed in themselves. It was the so-called self-deification. This kind of ancient god realm could be said to be the weakest. In other words, these so-called ancient gods were completely self-directed and self-deified. They could not be called gods at all. Besides possessing numerous divine artifacts, the reason the ninth young master was so strong was because he possessed the energy of faith. Because he was the ninth young master, he had his own fief and world. So, there was an endless supply of energy of faith to him. So, he was much stronger than ordinary ancient god experts. However, this power of faith was not pure. Moreover, there were not enough people. Many ancient god realm experts did not pay attention to this because pure power of faith was too difficult to obtain. In Qin Guan's words, the so-called gods were all fake, illusory, and not in the right position. Qin Guan had a detailed introduction to the ancient god realm in the Divine Tao Codex. Gods weren't conferred by oneself, they were conferred by the masses of living beings. If the masses believed in you, then you were a true god. A god who was supported by pure power of faith was a true god. Yi Xian's pupils suddenly constricted. Because he thought of something. How many people believed in Qin Guan? The celestial treasure pavilion was spread across the universe, and these people's worship of Qin Guan could be described as abnormal. Because Qin Guan had changed their fates. Moreover, Qin Guan had the Huaxia Academy. It was terrifying to think about it. Previously, Qin Guan kept saying that she did not cultivate. Did she mean that if she did not cultivate, others would help her cultivate? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched when he thought of this because he realized that it was entirely possible. This rich woman was incredible. Yi Xian sighed softly. He realized that the more he interacted with Qin Guan, the scarier she was. It was this woman who made him understand that money was truly omnipotent. He wondered where this woman had gone to now. The sect was about to destroy her celestial treasure pavilion, but she still didn't appear, leaving her to face it alone. He even suspected that this woman was doing it on purpose. Sigh. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. He withdrew his thoughts and stopped thinking about Qin Guan, and he started to carefully sense the primeval god realm. Gradually, countless human realm sword wills and human realm power appeared around him. Only now did Yi Xian realize that his mortal world sword intent and mortal world energy were actually formed from the power of faith. The reason why his human realm sword intent and human realm power were getting stronger and stronger was because there was an endless stream of people believing in him. He knew that it was definitely because of the academy. Of course, it shouldn't be just because of Guanxian Academy. After all, Qingqiu had gone to the Qingzhou region to develop the lower plane world. The martial arts civilization in the lower plane world was very low, so it was very easy to change it. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. He looked at the extremely powerful human realm sword intent and said softly, "From today onwards, I, Yi Xian, will be a good person. I want this world to be filled with love, affection, and harmony." At this point, he seemed to have thought of something, and he paused for a moment before he continued, "If I turn my father into a good person, will that be a great merit?" The man in green was speechless. Yi Xian chuckled. He felt that he could use his identity as the second generation to benefit the entire universe. He wanted to be the king of this universe. One day, if everyone in the universe believed in him, would he still be unable to defeat his father? Even his head would explode. The smile at the corner of Yi Xian's mouth gradually widened as a great plan slowly formed in his mind. A moment later, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. His aura began to gradually weaken. Not long after, he returned from the ancient god realm to the ancient god realm, but the next moment, his aura directly rushed from the ancient god realm to the ancient god realm. This time, he did not use Daebi. He directly reached the ancient god realm by relying on his human realm sword intent and human realm power. After reaching the ancient god realm, his expression began to become solemn. He found that this realm was not simple. He remembered that Qing once said that every realm could be reached to the limit. If he really reached the limit, Yi Xian took a deep breath. He could not bite off more than he could chew now. His top priority now was to stabilize this realm. A moment later, Yi Xian slowly spread out his hands. Soon, countless human realm sword intent and human realm power gushed out from his body. These human realm sword intent and human realm power hovered around him and continued to grow stronger. Just like this, time passed bit by bit. Immortal Treasure City, inside a large hall. Fu Yi and Xiao Lan's expressions were still incomparably solemn. Because during this period of time, they had been contacting Qin Guan every day, but until now, they had not been able to contact Qin Guan. In the end, they still could not feel at ease without Qin Guan, because they knew that whatever clan would definitely come again. Xiaolan said in a deep voice, "Brother Fu Yi, can you also mobilize a higher level of intelligence?" Fu Yi shook his head, "No." Xiaolan sighed in a low voice, "Without knowing the clan's movements, we are very passive." Fu Yi also sighed slightly. Xiaolan raised his head to look at the distant horizon, his eyes full of worry. In an unknown starry sky, a man stood quietly. He wore a luxurious robe, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He held a jade fan in his hand. Behind him, there was a gray-robed old man. This old man was Apotheon Mu, who had previously left. The man looked down at the Immortal Treasure City and chuckled, "Daebi, a bit interesting." Apotheon Mu said in a deep voice, "Third young master, don't underestimate the enemy." Third young master's expression was calm. "Of course, my ninth brother was still killed after using the primal chaos black fire. How could I dare to underestimate the enemy?" Apotheon Mu nodded, "That youth's origin is not simple. Not only is his bloodline powerful, but he also has a lot of divine items, especially that Daebi and that divine armor. Especially that divine armor, even the primal chaos black fire can't damage it." Divine armor. Third young master's eyes narrowed slightly. Apotheon Mu nodded slightly, "This divine armor is really terrifying. Moreover, now that the divine ruling fan and the primal chaos black fire are in Yi Xian's hands, to deal with him, at this point, he did not continue speaking. Third young master suddenly smiled, "Why should I deal with him?" Apotheon Mu looked at third young master, and third young master said lightly, "Now, my ninth brother's people already know that he was killed. Will his old mother let it go?" She definitely won't let it go. Therefore, we can just sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. In the end, we'll be the oriole behind and reap the benefits. Apotheon Mu wanted to say something but hesitated. He glanced at the third young master in front of him and sighed inwardly. In the end, he did not say anything. In fact, he wanted to say that in the current situation, they should not continue fighting among themselves. The clan was very strong, but the infighting was also terrifying. Especially the few young masters who were competing for the position of prince, they were almost like enemies. No, they were enemies. Apotheon Mu sighed inwardly. He looked at the immortal treasure pavilion below, his eyes full of worry. He had seen Yi Xian before, and based on his observation, this youth was extremely not simple. It should be said that this youth must have a terrifying force behind him. But whether it was the 9th young master or the 3rd young master, they did not care about it at all. He knew that until now, the clan had not really taken Yi Xian and this immortal treasure pavilion seriously. Thinking of this, Apotheon Mu sighed inwardly again. At this moment, the 3rd young master suddenly turned his head to look at the sky, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. That woman is here. Apotheon Mu turned his head and looked at the end of the starry sky in the distance, and a terrifying pressure swept over. Fu Yi and Xiaolan, who were in the hall below, suddenly raised their heads. In the next moment, their expressions became ugly. It's coming again. A moment later, a beautiful woman suddenly appeared in the sky above the immortal treasure city. This beautiful woman wore a palace dress, and her hair was coiled up high. Her entire face was as cold as ice. Behind her stood 9 experts, all of whom were above the ancient god realm. One of them was the 3rd uncle of the 9th young master who had escaped before. The beautiful woman suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, get out here!" Boom! A terrifying pressure crushed down on the immortal treasure city below. In an instant, the entire immortal treasure city was shocked. At this moment, a sword intent suddenly soared into the sky from the city, and in the blink of an eye, the terrifying pressure was directly shattered. In the next moment, a ray of sword light suddenly descended not too far away from the beautiful woman, and then Yi Xian appeared in front of the beautiful woman and the others. The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You're the one who killed my son." Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." The beautiful woman's face instantly became ferocious. "Who gave you the gall to do that?" As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly slapped him. Bang! In an instant, the space here collapsed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the distance, Yi Xian stood there without moving. Bang! A terrifying force slapped directly onto Yi Xian, and the space where Yi Xian resided was directly obliterated. However, Yi Xian was completely fine. The beautiful woman's eyes narrowed slightly when she witnessed this scene. "You." Yi Xian flicked his sleeve and said, "It was your son who wanted to kill me first." The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Don't you know that he's the sect leader's son?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "So what? Does being a member of the sect make you superior to others?" The beautiful woman clenched her right hand slowly, and she walked slowly towards Yi Xian. "I'll kill all your loved ones. I want you to watch them die in front of you, and I want you to experience the pain of losing your son." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "I don't have a son." The beautiful woman spoke fiercely. "Then you have a father, right?" Yi Xian hurriedly nodded, "Yes." The beautiful woman roared furiously, "Then you can experience the pain of losing your father." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly vanished on the spot. In the distance, Yi Xian was speechless. The pain of losing his father. Needless to say, he really wanted to experience it. Just thinking about it is exciting. Yi Xian couldn't help but chuckle. 7017K. Chapter 2356. Yi Xian restrained his thoughts because the beautiful woman had charged over to him. Yi Xian's expression was calm as he gazed at her. Suddenly, the sword burial in his hand transformed into a ray of light that slashed forward. Rumble. An expanse of light was blasted apart while the beautiful woman was pushed over 1 kilometer back. However, Yi Xian didn't take a single step back. The beautiful woman had just stopped when Yi Xian suddenly dashed forward. In the next moment, a beam of sword light slashed down from the top of the beautiful woman's head. Hiss. A sharp sound of something being torn apart resounded through the starry sky. A wisp of viciousness flashed through her eyes. She suddenly opened her palm, and then a strand of terrifying black light swept out from within it. Rumble. A terrifying explosion resounded abruptly. Yi Xian returned to where he stood earlier, and he frowned slightly as he glanced at his slightly trembling arm. He raised his head to look at the beautiful woman in the distance. At this moment, a black dragon was floating around her. A demon beast? Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. Why does the clan always like to fuse with beasts? In the distance, the beautiful woman glared at Yi Xian. Suddenly, she opened her palm, and in the next moment, the black dragon beside her suddenly roared angrily, and then it directly charged towards Yi Xian. Bang! This charge was like a torrent that carried a monstrous momentum, and it swept through everything. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. He opened his palm, and the sword burial floated in it. A moment later, a strand of terrifying sword intent suddenly swept out from within him. At the same time, the energy of the world instantly converged into his right arm. A moment of silence ensued before the sword burial in Yi Xian's palm suddenly flew out. Hiss! A ray of blood-red light tore through the surroundings and collided with the black dragon. It was a head-on collision. Bang! Suddenly, along with an explosion, a ray of light was blasted apart while the black dragon was blasted 30 kilometers away. However, at this moment, the beautiful woman suddenly rushed in front of Yi Xian. Before Yi Xian could react, she directly grabbed Yi Xian's throat. In an instant, her right hand turned pitch black. Then, a terrifying force directly engulfed Yi Xian. Rumble. With the two of them as the center, the spacetime around them directly turned into ashes. And yet, however, nothing happened to Yi Xian. Seeing this, the beautiful woman's pupils constricted. How, when she spoke up to this point, she hurriedly let go and was about to retreat. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly slashed his sword forward. The beautiful woman was startled and blocked with her right arm. Rumble. Before everyone's eyes, the beautiful woman retreated explosively for several tens of thousands of meters. When she stopped, her pitch-black right hand split open, and a stream of black blood sprayed out. The expressions of the experts behind the beautiful woman instantly became solemn when they witnessed this scene. Is this young man's strength that terrifying? At this moment, the beautiful woman's expression had become solemn as well. She raised her head and gazed at Yi Xian. Who are you? At this moment, her mind suddenly cleared up. Because this young man is absolutely not an ordinary person. Yi Xian grinned. What's the point of asking all of that now? As he spoke, he glanced at the beautiful woman and the others, and then he smiled. All of you can attack me together. Attack me together. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings instantly fell silent to the point a falling needle could be heard. Attack me together? The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. What gives you the right to act so arrogantly? Yi Xian grinned. It's not challenging to fight you alone. So, all of you can attack me together. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and the sword burial appeared in his grasp. Bang! The bloodline within Yi Xian's body was instantly activated. In an instant, the sword burial technique was activated as well, and a terrifying aura swept out from within him. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Yi Xian's eyes, and then he charged forward and slashed down with his sword. Hiss! The heavens and the earth trembled. A wisp of ferocity flashed through the beautiful woman's eyes. Kill him. As soon as she finished speaking, she and the others behind her vanished on the spot. It really was a group fight. Moreover, there were 9 top-rate experts behind the beautiful woman. 10 against 1. However, there wasn't a trace of fear in Yi Xian's eyes, and there was only excitement and fervor in his eyes. Fight! It didn't take long for the battle to erupt. Even though Yi Xian's cultivation wasn't as high as the beautiful woman and the others, and he was outnumbered, his imposing aura wasn't inferior to them at all. Moreover, even though he was being suppressed, the beautiful woman and the others weren't able to do anything to him at all. Because of Arya's armor. Even the joint forces of the 10 of them couldn't break through Arya's armor. It could be said that so long as they couldn't break through Yi Xian's defenses, then he was already in an invincible position. Meanwhile, the beautiful woman who led the group spoke in a ferocious voice, "Exhaust him to death." As far as she was concerned, even though the divine artifacts in Yi Xian's possession were terrifying, they would definitely be exhausted. Moreover, Yi Xian would exhaust himself as well. So, they could exhaust Yi Xian to death. At this moment, there was only a single thought in Yi Xian's mind, and it was to fight. To fight like a madman. He just attained the ancient god realm, and what he lacked the most now was battle. Only battle could help him stabilize his cultivation realm. The energy of his bloodline and the mortal world sword intent were growing stronger and stronger. The expressions of the beautiful woman and the others gradually became unsightly. Because they noticed that Yi Xian was actually growing stronger as the battle went on. Meanwhile, an old man by the beautiful woman's side spoke abruptly in a low voice, "Madam, we can't do anything to this kid. We have to retreat." The beautiful woman's expression instantly became unsightly. Retreat? How could she be willing to do that? The old man continued, "Moreover, this kid isn't simple at all. He's absolutely not an ordinary person. We have to investigate him clearly. Otherwise, something might happen." The beautiful woman fell silent for a short moment before she said, "Retreat. Retreat." As soon as she finished speaking, all of them immediately retreated explosively. Yi Xian was slightly stunned when he saw them retreat, and then he said, "Why should we retreat? Fight." As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack once more. Meanwhile, the beautiful woman and the others suddenly turned around and vanished into the distance. Yi Xian frowned slightly. They actually didn't fight to the death. Yi Xian remained silent for a short moment before he turned around and left. In an unknown part of the starry sky. After the beautiful woman stopped moving, her expression became extremely ferocious. "That damnable ant." An old man by her side hesitated for a moment before he said, "Madam, he isn't simple at all." The beautiful woman's expression was gloomy. "Go investigate him. Find out exactly what his background is." The old man nodded, and then he turned around and left. The beautiful woman's expression was extremely gloomy, and her eyes didn't conceal her killing intent at all. The 9th young master's third uncle glanced at the beautiful woman and felt slightly guilty. Actually, he could have saved the 9th young master earlier, but he hadn't expected that Yi Xian would really dare to disregard the sect leader. That was embarrassing. That fellow was too audacious. On the other side, the 3rd young master and the others were paying attention to the battle between Yi Xian and the beautiful woman's group. The 3rd young master frowned when he saw that the beautiful woman and the others couldn't do anything to Yi Xian. "This fellow." An old man by the 3rd young master's side spoke in a low voice, "That young man is extremely extraordinary." The 3rd young master smiled, "He is slightly extraordinary, but so what? Could he be even more extraordinary than my clan?" The old man glanced at the 3rd young master and sighed softly. Throughout the entire younger generation of the clan, only the 2nd young miss could be considered to be outstanding. Regardless of whether it was her natural talent or wisdom, she was truly top-notch. Unfortunately, such a terrifying genius was a woman. The clan was so large, so it was naturally impossible for it to be handed over to a woman. Actually, there was no harm in handing it over to a woman. However, not long ago, the 2nd young miss was suddenly appointed as the clan protector. Within the clan, her authority was second only to the clan leader. However, this was basically telling the world that the second young miss could not be the clan leader. Because according to the clan's tradition, the clan protector could not be the clan leader. What a pity. Within the clan, countless elders sighed. Because the second young miss was the most suitable candidate to be the next clan leader. Unfortunately, she was a woman. At this moment, the third young master suddenly smiled. My third aunt probably won't give up. After all, she killed her son. As he spoke, he turned to look at the old man. Li Zun, go down and help me investigate Yi Xian. Remember, in detail. The old man nodded and quietly left. In the same place, the third young master lightly waved his folding fan, the corner of his mouth slightly raised. Interesting, in this low-level universe, there is actually such a person. In an unknown world. On top of a mountain, a woman was playing chess with a black-robed old man. The woman wore a long purple dress, her long hair draped over her shoulders, and her facial features were exquisite without a single flaw. Especially her eyes, they were like whirlpools, as if they could suck people in. At this moment, the woman raised a white chess piece and placed it down. Then, she looked up at the old man and smiled. Grandpa, you lost. The old man looked at the chessboard in front of him. After a moment, he shook his head and smiled. Amazing. The woman turned to look at the distant sky. In the distant sky, a flock of red-crowned cranes slowly flew by. After a moment, she smiled. Grandpa, you came out of seclusion on purpose. I don't think it's just to play chess with me, right? The old man looked at the woman. Second young miss, you know my purpose. The woman smiled slightly, but I still want Grandpa to tell me personally. The old man looked straight at the woman. Do you have any complaints about stripping you of the clan's inheritance? The woman shook her head. The old man frowned slightly. Really? The woman stood up and slowly walked to the side. She bent down in front of a delicate flower and gently sniffed it, then smiled and said, how fragrant. The old man looked at the woman, not saying a word. The woman gently caressed the tender and beautiful flower and said with a smile, Grandpa, I'm leaving. The old man was slightly taken aback, and then he immediately stood up. Leave? The woman said with a smile, yes. I'm very curious about that unknown fairyland, so I want to take a look. As she spoke, she turned to look at the old man and said with a smile, Grandfather and father should also want me to leave, right? The old man was silent. The woman suddenly stood up and walked towards the distance. However, she quickly stopped and said, I just received a piece of news. Ninth brother was killed, and the Godguard fan and chaotic black flames were taken. In that universe, the person who could kill ninth brother is definitely not an ordinary person. Apart from internal corruption, there is another reason for the decline of a clan, and that is external disasters. Our clan is now unprecedentedly prosperous and powerful, but everything will fall when it reaches its peak. This is also the most dangerous time for our clan. That's all I have to say. Grandpa, take care. With that, she floated up and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. 7017K. Chapter 2357. Watching the girl disappear at the end of the horizon, the old man's expression was gloomy, his heart incomparably complicated. In fact, this little girl was really outstanding. Whether it was talent or intelligence, she was the best among the younger generation of the clan. However, she couldn't be the sect master. Once she was in power, with her strength and intelligence, the clan might become someone else's dowry in the future. They didn't dare to gamble. Thinking of this, the old man sighed softly and turned to leave. Perhaps, this girl's departure was a good thing for the clan. Celestial Treasure Pavilion. In the starry sky, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. He had a great time in the previous battle. Unfortunately, he found that he was the same as ordinary ancient god realm powerhouses. He still hadn't comprehended the true meaning of the power of faith. To put it simply, he didn't exert the power of the human world's sword intent and power of the human world to the extreme. However, he wasn't in a hurry. After all, he had just reached the ancient god realm. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, Fu Yi. As soon as his voice fell, Fu Yi appeared in front of Yi Xian. Fu Yi bowed slightly to Yi Xian and said respectfully, Young Master Yi. Yi Xian said softly, if they can't do anything to me, they will probably target the people around me. Speaking of this, his eyes narrowed slightly, Guanxian Academy. Fu Yi's pupils suddenly shrank, and he immediately said, Men. As soon as his voice fell, 35 ancient god realm powerhouses remained on the scene. Fu Yi said respectfully, We are at young Master Ye's command at any time. Yi Xian got up, returned to Guanxian Academy. Fu Yi wanted to say something but stopped. Yi Xian glanced at Fu Yi. They won't target Celestial Treasure Pavilion because the one they want to kill is me. Guanxian Academy was founded by me, so they will definitely go to Guanxian Academy. After saying that, he directly flew on his sword and disappeared on the spot. Fu Yi and the others hurriedly followed. In a certain location in the starry sky, the beautiful woman sat cross-legged with an ice-cold expression. In her hand was a scroll, and within the scroll was detailed information about Yi Xian. Meanwhile, the old man by her side spoke in a low voice. He fought the profound god realm once. It was impossible for him to defeat the profound god realm with his strength at that time, but he won in the end. After a detailed investigation, I discovered that the person who helped him was a green-robed man. The beautiful woman put down the scroll and frowned. A blue-robed man? The old man nodded. I've investigated this person, but found nothing. The beautiful woman turned to look at the old man. Nothing? The old man nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, There are no records of this person. We only know that he is Yi Xian's father. Apart from that, there is no other information. Father. After a moment of silence, the beautiful woman's expression gradually turned cold. Let's go to Guanxian Academy. The old man was stunned. The beautiful woman stood up. If we can't do anything to him, then we'll move against the people around him. I want to see if the people around him also have defensive artifacts like him. With that, she disappeared into the starry sky. The old man and the others quickly followed. Guanxian Academy. After Yi Xian returned to Guanxian Academy, he immediately summoned Xu Xian and Qing Qiu. Yi Xian glanced at them and said, Immediately dismiss the academy's students, let them leave the academy, immediately. Xu Xian was slightly taken aback. Just as he was about to speak, Qing Qiu suddenly said, Master, let's go. Saying that, she got up and left. Xu Xian hesitated for a moment, then turned around and left. In a short while, Guanxian Academy's students left one after another. With the help of Fu Yi and the others, it didn't take long for them to leave. Yi Xian came to the sky above Guanxian Academy, looking into the starry sky in silence. At this time, a woman appeared beside him. It was Qing Qiu. Qing Qiu looked into the starry sky, not saying a word. Yi Xian turned to look at Qing Qiu, then shook his head with a smile. Qing Qiu had reached the ancient god realm. Although he was mentally prepared, he was still shocked. Qing Qiu, this girl's cultivation speed was already terrifying to an indescribable degree. At this time, Qing Qiu suddenly said, If I came a few days later, I would have reached the ancient god realm. Yi Xian's expression froze. Qing Qiu turned to look at Yi Xian. Big brother, you've reached the ancient god realm. Yi Xian said with a smile, Kiddo, can you tell me how you cultivate? I'm really curious. Qing Qiu asked in return, Is it difficult to cultivate? Yi Xian, Qing Qiu looked up into the starry sky. Isn't cultivation a very simple thing? It's like eating, as long as you have hands. Yi Xian's face immediately darkened, feeling suffocated. Qing Qiu looked at the starry sky and said softly, We should be there soon, right? Yi Xian nodded. He opened his palm and the Dadeabi slowly floated to Qing Qiu. You can use it. Qing Qiu looked at Dadeabi and said, No need. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Qing Qiu said calmly, this thing is useless. Dedeabi, Yi Xian hesitated, then asked, little girl, do you know what this pen is? Qing Qiu nodded, Dedeabi. Yi Xian said solemnly, you know it's Dedeabi, but you still say it's useless? Qing Qiu nodded, it's useless indeed. Yi Xian hurriedly said, it can help people improve their realm. If you use it now, it can directly help you reach the ancient god realm. Qing Qiu shook her head slightly, this kind of realm is illusory. With that, she paused, then added, brother, you should not use this thing too much. It's illusory and not real. If you really want to improve your realm, you can read Miss Qin Guan's books, especially her books about realm. Those books are very good. If you can't thoroughly understand a realm, even if you reach that realm, it's meaningless. Of course, you can use this pen as a reference, but you can't rely on it too much. If you use this pen to reach any realm, over time, you will become seriously dependent on it. If you lose this pen in the future, what will you do then? Yi Xian was silent. Qing Qiu smiled, this pen is a complete layman on the path of realm. Therefore, using it to reach a realm will cause many problems, but its owner is not bad. Yi Xian looked at Qing Qiu, its owner? Qing Qiu nodded. Yi Xian looked at Qing Qiu, girl, did you remember the memory of your previous life? Previous life. Qing Qiu blinked, what previous life? Yi Xian glared at Qing Qiu, don't play dumb with me. Qing Qiu giggled, then said, brother, do you really want to know? If you want, I can tell you. Because I will never lie to you. Yi Xian nodded, of course. Qing Qiu nodded slightly, and was about to speak. At this moment, the starry sky above them suddenly trembled violently. Boom! Soon, 10 terrifying auras swept down from the depths of the starry sky, as if they were going to crush the earth. They're coming. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and the zhangjian in his hands suddenly trembled violently. The next moment, a terrifying sword intent shot up into the sky and met the 10 auras. Rumble. In an instant, the entire sky was seething. However, Yi Xian's sword intent couldn't withstand the 10 auras. Yi Xian's face darkened. He wasn't afraid of the 10 auras, but if the 10 auras descended, the entire world would be destroyed. Therefore, he couldn't let the 10 auras descend. Right at this moment, Qing Qiu suddenly blasted his fist upwards. The moment she punched, the world was suddenly filled with awe-inspiring righteousness. Rumble. The punch shot up into the sky and smashed the 10 auras. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he turned to look at Qing Qiu, feeling shocked. Qing Qiu glanced at him, and when she saw Yi Xian looking at her, she hurriedly said, brother, don't be shocked, this is normal. Yi Xian, just then, the beautiful woman and the others appeared not far away from Yi Xian and Qing Qiu. The beautiful woman's eyes fell on Qing Qiu, and gradually, she frowned. Qing Qiu smiled, why are you looking at me? The beautiful woman said in a low voice, what punch was that? Qing Qiu smiled, awe-inspiring righteousness fist. Awe-inspiring righteousness fist. The beautiful woman frowned, what do you mean? Qing Qiu shook her head, illiteracy is really scary. Hearing this, the beautiful woman's face turned cold. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Qing Qiu's words were not very hurtful, but they were extremely insulting. The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Qing Qiu. In the next moment, she suddenly smashed her fist forward, and a terrifying force swept out from her fist towards Qing Qiu. Qing Qiu's expression was calm, and she directly punched out. Rumble. The terrifying force in front of her was directly smashed, and at the same time, the beautiful woman was directly pushed back thousands of meters. At this moment, everyone present was shocked. Including Yi Xian. At this moment, he was completely dumbfounded. After all, the beautiful woman was an expert above the ancient god realm, and she was 2 realms higher than Qing Qiu. However, this little girl actually pushed the beautiful woman back with a single punch? Is it really that ridiculous? Yi Xian suddenly felt that this world was slightly unfair. The beautiful woman gazed at Qing Qiu with disbelief. How could this be possible? You. How could this be possible? At this moment, her mind was buzzing because she was 2 realms higher than this little girl. However, this little girl had actually pushed her back with a single punch. After all, she hadn't held back at all just now. Qing Qiu glanced at the beautiful woman and the others, and then she looked at Yi Xian. Big brother, how many do you want to fight? How many? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, I'm fine with anything. The beautiful woman suddenly spoke fiercely, You're fine with anything? Little swordsman, you don't know the immensity of the heavens and the earth. Do you know that my clan? Qing Qiu suddenly interrupted the beautiful woman. Is your clan very powerful? The beautiful woman gazed at Qing Qiu, and Qing Qiu's expression was calm. Who gave you the courage to threaten my brother? As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her right hand. In the next moment, Zangjin flew directly into her hand. In an instant, the sky changed color. On Yi Xian's waist, Dedeabi suddenly trembled violently. It was fear. Dedeabi was terrified. 7017K. Chapter 2358. A Swordsman. Yi Xian stared at Qing Qiu, who was holding the sword in front of him. His mind went blank as if he had been struck by lightning. Was Qing Qiu a swordsman? Moreover, he could clearly feel that Dedeabi was terrified. Qing Qiu, who was holding the sword, was able to make Dedeabi feel terrified. Just then, Qing Qiu suddenly let go of Dedeabi. She glanced at Yi Xian and hurriedly returned the sword to Yi Xian. Yi Xian gulped and then asked, What are you doing? Qing Qiu looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, Brother, I don't know how to use a sword. What the hell? Yi Xian looked at Qing Qiu in disbelief. Girl, are you kidding me? Just now, Zangjin made a sound. You're telling me that you don't know how to use a sword? Qing Qiu said seriously, I don't know how to use a sword. Under normal circumstances, I don't lie. Yi Xian looked at Qing Qiu and said nothing. Qing Qiu hurriedly turned her head away, feeling a little guilty. Actually, I know a little. Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, the beautiful woman in the distance suddenly said in a trembling voice, What kind of monster are you? At this moment, she was really shocked. Yi Xian had already shocked her, but she had never thought that there would be someone more terrifying than Yi Xian in this place. When Qing Qiu held the sword, she actually felt a sense of fear, an inexplicable fear. She had never encountered such fear before. Who is this girl? At this moment, the beautiful woman suddenly felt a little uneasy. Qing Qiu glanced at the beautiful woman. Brother, I'll fight this woman, and you can fight the other 9 people, is that okay? Yi Xian said through Xian Qi, We can't fight in this world. Qing Qiu fell silent. Just as Yi Xian had said, they couldn't fight in this world. If they fought in this world, the entire world would collapse. The entire universe of gods couldn't withstand their power. Qing Qiu walked to Yi Xian's side and said softly, Then what should we do? Yi Xian glanced at the beautiful woman and the others in the distance and sent a voice transmission, We have to think of a way to deceive them into going somewhere else. Qing Qiu took half a step back and said, Bro, you're up to it. Yi Xian was speechless. In the distance, an old man by the beautiful woman's side said in a low voice, Madam, we have to retreat. The beautiful woman turned and roared, Retreat? Did my son die in vain? The old man was silent. The beautiful woman turned to look at Yi Xian with a ferocious expression. If we die here today, it's equivalent to him declaring war on the sect leader. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, You want to use your death in exchange for the irreconcilable enmity between us and the sect? The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian, Yes. Yi Xian glanced at the 9 people behind the beautiful woman and said, I think that you should be more rational. Take them back now and think of another way. So long as your thinking doesn't go astray, there's always a way. So, why fight to the death? The old man by the beautiful woman's side hurriedly said, Madam, I think he makes sense. The beautiful woman turned around and spoke angrily, Are you afraid of death? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, Madam, I'm not afraid of death. I just think that we have a better way, and there's no need to fight to the death with them. After all, we still have the sect leader, and we can ask the patriarch to mobilize the strength of the clan to deal with them. The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Once we die, then the irreconcilable enmity between us and the sect will be irreconcilable. As soon as she finished speaking, she spread her palms open, and then a strand of terrifying energy swept out from within her. A moment later, a black dragon appeared by her side again. However, the old man suddenly said, Retreat. As soon as he finished speaking, he led the 8 others along as he turned around and vanished into the depths of the starry sky. The beautiful woman was stunned by this scene, and then her expression instantly became ferocious. All of you actually dared to betray me. The starry sky cracked apart. However, the 9 of them didn't pay any attention to her, and they just vanished into the starry sky. She'd gone mad. They naturally wouldn't go mad with her. Moreover, their 9th young master was dead, so what was the point of them following her now? In their opinion, they needed to find a new young master to protect and not go mad with her. It would be fine if they could defeat her, but the problem was that both Yi Xian and the woman weren't ordinary monstrous geniuses. They would have to fight with their lives on the line. Moreover, the beautiful woman clearly wanted them to give their lives away. So, how could they be willing to do that? Once the 9 of them left, only the beautiful woman remained here. She didn't leave, and she just stared fixedly at Yi Xian with a gaze that was sharp like a sword. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, You intend to use your death in exchange for the irreconcilable enmity between me and the sect? The beautiful woman remained expressionless. Yes. Yi Xian nodded. Then what are you waiting for? Attack. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through her eyes, and then she vanished on the spot. Bang! A strand of terrifying force suddenly swept through the surroundings, and then an enormous black dragon charged directly towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly said, Qing Qiu, don't allow our strength to destroy this universe. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward and slashed with his sword. Bang! The black dragon was instantly blasted flying. Meanwhile, the beautiful woman had arrived in front of Yi Xian, and she smashed her fist towards Yi Xian's face. However, Yi Xian actually didn't dodge at all and allowed her fist to smash against his face. At practically the exact same moment, Yi Xian's sword slashed horizontally and slashed against the beautiful woman's chest. Bang! Hiss! Yi Xian didn't move at all, but the beautiful woman was blasted over 30 kilometers away by Yi Xian's attack. Moreover, her body was instantly blasted apart as soon as she stopped moving, and then a sword pierced through the center of her forehead. Bang! The beautiful woman was instantly nailed on the spot. Yi Xian gazed at her. He knew that she was courting death on purpose. The beautiful woman's expression was calm as she waited for Yi Xian to kill her. Yi Xian smiled and said, Let me guess. The reason you did this was because you felt that the clan wouldn't become mortal enemies with me. Because you noticed that I wasn't as simple as you thought. You were afraid that someone with intelligence would come from the clan and reconcile with me, right? The beautiful woman didn't speak. Yi Xian continued, Once the 9th young master died, you lost all your bargaining chips. In other words, you have no value at all. So, you used such an extreme method to take revenge for your son. The beautiful woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. The enmity of my son's death is absolutely irreconcilable. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I won't waste my breath on you about right and wrong. What I want to say is that I didn't intend to kill your son. I wanted you to give me 200 million universe meridians in exchange, but your son's second uncle refused to agree no matter what. As he spoke, he shook his head slightly. I feel that something isn't right about this. Do you want to go back and investigate? The beautiful woman frowned slightly. That old man from just now? Yi Xian nodded. I suspect that the person who asked me to retreat is someone sent by another young master. You should go back and investigate. Also, I can tell you clearly that I didn't kill your son at the beginning. As long as he gave me 200 million universe meridians, would have definitely let him live. However, not only did his second uncle refuse to give it to me, he even provoked me like crazy. I feel that something is wrong. Hearing this, the beautiful woman's expression instantly became ferocious. Is that true? Yi Xian smiled and said, I'm a scholar. I never lie. The beautiful woman looked at Yi Xian for a moment and said, You won't kill me? Yi Xian nodded. I'll be honest with you. I want you to go back and cause trouble for that old man and cause internal strife. The beautiful woman stared at Yi Xian. Do you think I'll be fooled? Yi Xian smiled and said, It's not a question of whether I'll be fooled or not. What I want to say is that your son's death is partly my fault, but that old man is also a problem. You want to harm me? That's not good, right? Also, before your son died, he was very angry, not at me, but at his second uncle. You can go back and investigate this. Also, he just left without hesitation. Don't you think it's very strange? The beautiful woman coldly looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian smiled slightly. If you don't believe me, then you can commit suicide now. If you commit suicide now, your goal will still be achieved. The clan won't rest until I'm dead. The beautiful woman was silent for a moment, then she turned and disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian looked into the depths of the starry sky and didn't speak. Qing Qiu walked to Yi Xian's side and said softly, She will go find trouble with that old man, right? Yi Xian smiled and said, Yes. Qing Qiu turned to look at Yi Xian and smiled slightly. Big brother wants to buy some time for yourself? Yi Xian nodded. Very smart. Qing Qiu giggled. Big brother, I'm going to cultivate. Yi Xian suddenly said, Do you need money? Qing Qiu blinked. This, Yi Xian shook his head. He opened his palm and a spatial ring flew to Qing Qiu. There were 100 million universe veins in the spatial ring. 100 million. Qing Qiu was stunned. Yi Xian smiled and said, Spend it first. Tell me if it's not enough. Qing Qiu put away the spatial ring and nodded. Okay. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Yi Xian glanced at Qing Qiu in the distance. For some reason, he felt that Qing Qiu was becoming more and more different. Moreover, he had an indescribable feeling towards Qing Qiu. Close. Yi Xian shook his head and restrained his thoughts. He didn't care about this little girl for now. His top priority right now was to stabilize his cultivation and then take the initiative to go to the clan. He couldn't let them come looking for him again. Because it would be extremely disadvantageous to him if the battlefield was here. Yi Xian turned around and left. He found a quiet place and was just about to cultivate when a woman walked over from the side. It was Xian Gudian. Yi Xian was slightly stunned when he saw Xian Gudian, and then he smiled and said, Miss Tian. Xian Gudian glanced at the horizon and said, Has the enemy retreated? Yi Xian nodded. They've retreated for now. Xian Gudian walked over to Yi Xian and said, How can I help you? Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he smiled and said, I can handle it. Xian Gudian remained silent for a moment, and then she said, Are you serious about establishing an academy? Yi Xian smiled and said, Of course. Xian Gudian nodded slightly. My ancient immortal clan will cooperate fully with you. Yi Xian smiled and said, Thank you. Xian Gudian looked at Yi Xian with a slightly cold gaze. What did you say? Yi Xian smiled slightly. Thank the heavens for allowing me to meet such a good person like you. Dedeabi, Xian Gudian's face instantly blushed when she heard Yi Xian, and she glared at Yi Xian shyly. You really like to say such nice things to deceive women. You, don't say another word. Say another word. Dedeabi. 7017K. Chapter 2359. Looking at the bashful Xian Gudian, Yi Xian laughed. Seeing that Xian Gudian was about to get angry, Yi Xian quickly stopped and said seriously, Little Yao, go back and cultivate well. I will take care of the matters of the clan. Don't worry about me. Xian Gudian looked at Yi Xian and said softly, You are too honest. How can I not worry when dealing with them? Yi Xian, Xian Gudian continued, in short, you have to be careful when dealing with people. Don't be sincere to everyone. In this world, the most complicated thing is the human heart. Don't easily trust others, understand? Yi Xian smiled slightly. Understood. Xian Gudian looked at Yi Xian, promise me, don't be so honest in the future. Yi Xian, in the end, Yi Xian promised Xian Gudian, and Xian Gudian left with satisfaction. After Xian Gudian left, Dedeabi's voice suddenly sounded. Are you being honest? Yi Xian said indifferently, none of your business. Dedeabi said angrily, be more polite with your words, you. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Dedeabi was silent for a moment, and said, do as you please. Yi Xian shrugged and turned to leave. Yi Xian returned to his hall, and Qing Qiu had already left. As for where she went, he didn't know. He wasn't worried about Qing Qiu. Not to mention others, even he didn't have the confidence to defeat this girl. This girl was very mysterious. Even he might not be able to do anything to her. Especially when this girl held the sword, not to mention Dedeabi, even he, who had the invincible sword body, felt his heart palpitate. Could this girl have been a swordsman in her previous life? Yi Xian shook his head, collected his thoughts, and continued to practice instant of invincibility. This sword skill was still his strongest sword skill, and he hadn't used it yet. What was a trump card? Only those that have not been used are trump cards. This move had to be used at a critical moment. The only thing that made him depressed was that this move was too expensive. Although he had quite a lot of money now, every time he spent it, it still made his heart ache. What made him even more speechless was that there was still no news from Qin Guan. If this rich woman was here, he would be able to relax a lot. Although that whatever clan was very fierce, he firmly believed that they would definitely not be able to withstand Qin Guan's disregard for martial ethics and those starry sky divine warships. His scalp went numb at the thought of those messy things. Moreover, this woman was really, really rich. They were the kind of people who could really kill you with money. But now, there was no news of this woman. This made Yi Xian speechless. Sigh. Yi Xian sighed in his heart, collected his thoughts, and continued to cultivate. The news that the beautiful woman and the others had come to cause trouble for Yi Xian quickly spread throughout the universe of gods. Therefore, many forces in the universe of gods also discovered the existence of the clan. All the forces felt a sense of crisis. This was a threat from the forces of the outer universe. All the forces decisively chose to band together and get close to Yi Xian. Currently, in the entire universe of gods, only Yi Xian could compete with that mysterious clan. Of course, there was another reason, and that was that they could not leave Guanxian Academy. Guanxian Academy was developing too quickly. If they wanted to improve quickly, they could only follow Guanxian Academy. Naturally, Yi Xian did not refuse the many forces of the universe of gods. He had already regarded the universe of gods as the temporary headquarters of Guanxian Academy. The reason why it was temporary was because the place he really liked was Guanxian Universe. The universe that he and Qin Guan had named after. Moreover, Qing Qiu had already sent people there to develop. In the room. Yi Xian was reading an ancient book written by Qin Guan. It was a book that described realms, and he had obtained it from Fu Yi. In this ancient book, there was a detailed description of the realms above the ancient god realm. The realm above the ancient god realm was the ancestral god realm. Earlier, he'd always thought that the beautiful woman and the others were at the universe enlightened ancestral god realm, but the truth was that they weren't. The beautiful woman and the others were still at the ancient god realm. However, their clans were too powerful, so they obtained a huge amount of faith energy. So, they were much stronger than ordinary ancient gods. Reaching the ancestral god realm was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It was not something that could be achieved by simply comprehending for a few days. One had to have an endless amount of faith energy. In Qin Guan's words, an ancestral god realm expert needed at least the faith energy of 10 mid-tier universes to condense a true godhead. However, this might not necessarily allow one to become an ancestral god. It depended on one's own fortune. It could be said that there was a qualitative difference between the ancestral god realm and the ancient god realm. It was precisely because of this that countless powers fought with each other for the sake of the faith energy of all the living beings in these universes. Besides that, those large clans cared about the position of patriarch very much as well. Because the person who became the patriarch would be able to obtain the most faith energy. Faith energy. Yi Xian fell silent. He was developing towards this path as well, but his intuition told him that if he obtained faith energy from enslaving living beings, then it wouldn't be true. In Qin Guan's book, he was able to sense that Qin Guan felt disdain towards many so-called ancestral gods because the faith energy obtained by many ancestral god realm experts wasn't pure. Besides that, there was another realm between the ancient god realm and ancestral god realm. This realm wasn't recorded in this book by Qin Guan, and it was the half-step ancestral god realm. Qin Guan felt disdain towards this realm. As far as she was concerned, the ancestral god realm was the ancestral god realm, the ancient god realm was the ancient god realm, and the entire half-step ancestral god realm was simply a joke. As for the ancestral god realm, Qin Guan also felt disdain towards it because she'd practically never seen many so-called true gods. Such true gods could be considered as true saints. They weren't hypocritical saints, but true saints. Such existences were very few in number in the world. In fact, there was once someone who could be considered as half a true god. That person was Mu Niannian. She'd sincerely sacrificed for the fifth dimension, and the spiritual beings of the fifth dimension respected her from the bottom of their hearts. Besides Mu Niannian, there was another one, and that was Little White. The spirit ancestor. The faith those spirits had towards the spirit ancestor was more real than real gold. The spirit ancestor was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts. At this moment, he suddenly felt slightly vigilant against himself. He absolutely couldn't treat the academy as a tool to enslave living beings. His original intention of establishing the academy wasn't for the so-called faith energy, but to change the universe. If he treated the academy as a tool to enslave living beings one day, then he would be going against his original intention and his own heart. When he thought up to this point, Yi Xian couldn't help but shake his head and smile. Even if it was a good deed, he had to constantly reflect on himself. Otherwise, when the good deed brought him a lot of benefits, he might lose himself and turn a good deed into a bad deed. Helping living beings and enslaving living beings were completely different. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and continued to cultivate. In an unknown universe, there was a powerful race, and that was the ancestral clan. The current sect master could be said to be like the sun in the sky because two experts above the ancestral god realm had appeared in the sect master in the last 10,000 years. Moreover, the sect master ruled a high-grade universe, 16 middle-grade universes, and hundreds of low-grade universes. It could be said that the sect master was really like the sun in the sky. Sect Hall. This was the hall where the sect master held meetings. At this moment, many experts of the sect master were gathered in the hall. The person in the lead was the sect master, Zhong Shou, who was also at the peak of the ancestral god realm. The elders of the sect were seated on both sides of the hall. The weakest amongst them was at the ancient god realm, and many were even at the half-step ancestral god realm. Meanwhile, Zhong Shou suddenly said, "What do all of you think about Little Ninth's death?" An old man spoke indifferently, "Annihilate his 10 clans and flatten the low-grade universe he resides in." The others nodded successively to display their agreement. Killing the 9th young master was equivalent to looking down on the sect master. Even though there was a competition for the position of heir within the sect master, it was an internal matter of the sect. If outsiders came to bully the sect master, then the entire sect would naturally have to unite. Zhong Shou glanced at them, and then he gazed at a man who was resting with his eyes closed. "Big brother, what do you think?" Everyone gazed at the man when they heard this. He was the current eldest young master of the sect, Zhongzheng. Zhongzheng fell silent for a moment before he said, "According to my knowledge, 9th brother brought the God Rule fan and the chaotic black flames with him. However, he was still killed. Besides that, 2nd aunt brought 9 supreme experts with her, but they returned empty-handed as well." When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment before he continued, "I'm afraid he's not that simple." Many experts in the hall frowned when they heard this. Meanwhile, another man suddenly smiled and said, "Big brother, what's wrong? Are you afraid now?" The man who spoke was the 7th young master of the sect, Zhong Yan, and he was one of the contenders for the position of heir. Zhongzheng glanced at Zhong Yan and spoke indifferently, "I just made a reasonable analysis, that's all." Zhong Yan chuckled lightly, "Big brother, do you know that 9th brother is dead? Moreover, he's missing many experts from our sect. This isn't a slap to the face, it's a slap to the face. Can you tolerate that?" Zhongzheng frowned and was about to speak when Zhong Yan said, "Big brother, if we don't avenge him, then how will the people of the outside world look at our sect? Moreover, he's on good terms with the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, and the Celestial Treasure Pavilion is a power that our sect intends to conquer." At this point, he smiled. "Just like what Elder said, I suggest that not only should we exterminate their entire clan, but we should also slaughter the universe they are in. This will serve as a warning to the world and let them know that not any Tom, Dick, or Harry can defy my sect master." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the hall agreed. Right now, the sect was like the sun in the sky. But at this time, someone actually dared to kill a member of the sect. Moreover, it was a young master of the sect. This was equivalent to trampling on the dignity of the clan. How could he tolerate this? 7017K. Chapter 2360. Within the hall, Zhong Shou sighed in his heart as he gazed at the indignant crowd below him. He seemed to have thought of something, and he swept the hall with his gaze yet didn't see the person he wanted to see. Second little girl. In the past, he'd always discussed everything with the second little girl, yet now, she'd left. Towards this little girl, he more or less felt guilty. Of course, he felt even more pity. If this little girl was a man, then she would be the young master of the clan, and no one would be able to compete with her. Unfortunately, she was a woman. He naturally didn't dare hand over the clan's millions of years of inheritance to a woman. After all, the slightest mistake might cause the entire clan to be used as a dowry. So, even though he owed her a great deal, he still couldn't allow her to inherit the clan. Zhong Shou restrained his thoughts, and then he turned around to look at an elder at the side. "Grand Elder, what do you think?" Everyone within the hall instantly fell silent when they heard Zhong Shou, and then they gazed at the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder went silent for a short moment before he said, "Our clan's plan is to devour the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. Yet now, Yi Xian has appeared out of nowhere. Not only has he colluded with the Immortal Treasure Pavilion, he even killed the young master of our clan. He's looking down upon our clan. I suggest that we kill him first to establish our might, and then devour the Immortal Treasure Pavilion along the way." Zhong Shou fell silent for a short moment before he said, "Just as Big Brother said, he's absolutely not an ordinary person since he was able to kill Little Ninth who possessed 2 divine artifacts. Moreover, we know very little about his origins, so we can't underestimate him. The Grand Elder nodded lightly. Little Ninth possesses those divine artifacts, so it can be said that even a few half-step universe-enlightened ancestral gods would find it difficult to kill him. However, Yi Xian was able to kill him. Obviously, he possesses extremely formidable divine artifacts as well. Moreover, his own combat strength is extraordinary. Since such a figure was able to appear in a place like that, then he definitely possesses a formidable power standing behind him. However, we were only able to find out that there was only a green-clothed man standing behind him, and that person had made an appearance earlier. He's the key. A green-clothed man. Zhong Shou frowned slightly. Did you find out his origins? The Great Elder shook his head. I can't find anything. I only know that he is Yi Xian's father. Zhong Shou stood up. After a moment of silence, he said, kill Yi Xian first. The Great Elder looked at Zhong Shou. Why don't we find out the identity of this green-robed man first? Zhong Shou shook his head. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, Zhong Yu's ancestor had left behind an ancestral teaching. Do not provoke a family called the Yang clan. If you meet a member of the Yang clan, you must be on good terms with them. At this point, he chuckled, this Yi Xian's surname is Yi, so he's obviously not a member of the Yang clan. Since he's not a member of the Yang clan, why should our clan be afraid of him? He killed members of my clan, which means he is looking down on my clan. He should be exterminated. Hearing this, everyone in the hall nodded in agreement. The Grand Elder hesitated for a moment before he said, annihilation is inevitable. However, we should still be more cautious. When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment before he continued, why don't we let the second little girl take charge of this matter? We can be at ease if she does it. Hearing this, the princes in the hall all glanced at the Great Elder. They were a little displeased. Because the Grand Elder had always supported the second young miss, so the Grand Elder's intentions for asking the second young miss to take charge of this matter were impure. Zhong Shou glanced at the Grand Elder, and then he said, the second young miss has headed to the celestial domain, so don't disturb her. As he spoke, he glanced at the seventh young master, you do it. The Grand Elder sighed in his heart and didn't speak another word. The corners of the seventh young master's mouth curled up slightly, and he immediately bowed deeply. I won't let you down. Zhong Shou gazed at the seventh young master, you can mobilize the Divine Pavilion Guard. The seventh young master's eyes narrowed slightly, and he hurriedly said, I won't let you down. He knew that the clan was giving him a chance. In the past, whenever the clan had a major matter, it would be handed over to the second young miss to deal with. Now that the second young miss had left, it was obvious that the clan intended to foster him. Awesome! The seventh young master was unable to restrain his excitement. He knew that this was a great opportunity for him. The eldest young master glanced at the seventh young master but didn't speak. Meanwhile, Zhong Shou suddenly said, disperse. As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and left. The corners of the seventh young master's mouth curled up slightly, and he looked at the eldest young master and smiled. Big brother, do you want to go with me? The eldest young master glanced at the seventh young master. Don't underestimate him. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The seventh young master sneered as he watched the eldest young master leave. Yes, yes, yes. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The universe of gods. Yi Xian was lying silently at the entrance to the book hall. The members of the academy had left, so the academy was extremely deserted. Yi Xian was holding an ancient book in his hand, and he was lost in thought as he read it. A refreshing breeze blew past as he read in satisfaction. Yi Xian really liked this feeling of peace. There was no fighting, only silence, and only books. After a long time, Yi Xian took a deep breath. He covered his face with the book and went into deep thought. Reading every day could calm one's mind. He also realized that when he was reading, his heart would naturally calm down. It was different from before. In the past, he would deliberately calm down, but now, his heart was naturally calm. Settle down, cultivate the body, cultivate the heart, and cultivate one's nature. He realized that this was a great help to his sword Dao. At this moment, he heard footsteps, and soon, a fragrant wind assaulted him. A woman squatted beside Yi Xian. It was Yan Bei. Yan Bei removed the book from Yi Xian's face, and she just looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian opened his eyes, and the moment he opened them, he saw a beautiful face. It had to be said that Yan Bei was really beautiful. Even at such a close distance, Yi Xian couldn't find any flaws on her face. It was exquisite to the point of perfection. Yan Bei blinked. Do I look good? Yi Xian smiled. Yes. Yan Bei suddenly reached out and grabbed Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian instinctively struggled free. Yan Bei glared at Yi Xian. Can't I touch you? Yi Xian was speechless. Yan Bei pushed her luck. She suddenly caressed Yi Xian's cheek with her right hand and said softly, I become the Yan clan's leader. Yi Xian was slightly startled, and then he said, Congratulations. Yan Bei looked at Yi Xian. Do you want me to go back? Yi Xian smiled. Do you want to go back yourself? Yan Bei glared at Yi Xian. I'll ask you first. Don't give me anything else. Just answer my question. Yi Xian looked at Yan Bei. Suddenly, he reached out and gently placed his hand on Yan Bei's face. Yan Bei was slightly startled, and then she blushed. Yi Xian smiled. If I say I hurt you, you'll definitely be very sad, right? Yan Bei lowered her head slightly and was silent. Yi Xian continued, if I say something nice, you'll definitely be very happy. Yan Bei looked up at Yi Xian. Then tell me the truth. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. I'm afraid. Yan Bei was stunned. Then she asked, what are you afraid of? Yi Xian said softly, along the way, I've met a few women, but now, they're all very far away from me. I'm afraid that one day, you'll be like them, gradually becoming a passerby and then forgotten by the world. As he said that, he looked at Dedeabi at his waist. I used to suspect that Dedeabi was messing around, but later I realized that this guy doesn't seem to be that powerful. Dedeabi, Yi Xian looked at Yan Bei and said softly, I'm really very afraid. Yan Bei was silent for a moment. I can't keep up with your footsteps, so I'll be forgotten, right? Yi Xian was about to speak when Dedeabi suddenly said, Young Master Yi, this has nothing to do with me. The reason for this is that you've never been serious and responsible. Just tell me, how many women have you flirted with along the way? Chapter 2361. Yi Xian ignored Dedeabi. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind. Qing Er's emotions are unstable. Why is Qing Er's emotions unstable? Yi Xian got up, his brows furrowed. Yan Bei whispered, what's wrong? Yi Xian looked at Yan Bei, do you want to go back and be the clan leader? If you do, then go back. If not, then stay in the academy. Yan Bei was silent. Yi Xian smiled, no matter what choice you make, it will not affect our relationship. Yan Bei looked up at Yi Xian, what relationship? Yi Xian shrugged, an ambiguous relationship. Yan Bei glared at Yi Xian, you are so thick-skinned. After saying that, she turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian did not see the smile on her face the moment she turned around. Yi Xian looked at the horizon and whispered, I am such a scumbag. Saying that, he shook his head and said, Brother Bai, I want to see Qing Er. Dedeabi said, do you want to meet through space? Yi Xian shook his head, send me to the Milky Way. Dedeabi immediately said, arrange it. As soon as he said that, Dedeabi on Yi Xian's waist suddenly trembled. The next moment, the space around Yi Xian directly became illusory. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Brother Bai, if I leave now, what if those clans come looking for trouble with my academy?" Dedeabi immediately said, "I will guard your academy for you. During this period, if anyone dares to come looking for trouble, I will arrange it clearly." Yi Xian, Dedeabi continued, "You are too far away from the Milky Way. Even with my strength, I can't teleport you there. Therefore, you need to travel through time. Also, you have to come back within 2 hours because the time in the Milky Way is different from the time on your side. If you come back too late, it will affect many things on your side." As soon as he finished speaking, the Dedeabi on Yi Xian's waist suddenly trembled violently. Soon, Yi Xian completely disappeared. In an unknown and mysterious spacetime, Yi Xian frowned. At this moment, he was traveling through spacetime at a terrifying speed. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Brother Bai, ordinary people can't go to the Milky Way, right?" Dedeabi said, "Yes." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Dedeabi said, "This place is a pure land. Master doesn't let anyone disturb this place." Yi Xian was curious. "Your master?" Dedeabi said, "Is it strange?" Yi Xian smiled. "It is a little shocking. By the way, is your master powerful?" Dedeabi was silent for a moment and said, "This question," Yi Xian asked again, "is he as powerful as Qing-er?" Dedeabi, Yi Xian wanted to ask something else, but Dedeabi suddenly said, "We are here." Boom! As soon as Dedeabi's voice fell, Yi Xian appeared directly on a beach. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and looked around. At this moment, he was standing on a beach. In front of him was the endless sea. Not far away, there was a woman in a plain dress standing on the beach. Qing-er. Seeing Qing-er, a smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. At this time, Qing-er slowly turned around. When she saw Yi Xian, her cold face suddenly melted and a smile appeared on it. "Brother." Her voice was as soft as water. Yi Xian slowly walked to Qing-er and stretched out his right hand. Qing-er placed her right hand in Yi Xian's. Yi Xian held Qing-er's lily-white hand tightly and said softly, "Qing-er." Qing-er suddenly fell into Yi Xian's arms. She leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder and closed her eyes. Her arms wrapped around Yi Xian's waist and she didn't say anything. Qing-er. She was only Yi Xian's Qing-er. After a long time, the brother and sister sat on a large rock. Qing-er leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder. The two looked at the horizon. There, a red sun was slowly rising. It was a beautiful sight. Qing-er suddenly said softly, "Beautiful." Yi Xian turned to look at Qing, who was close at hand. He said softly, "You've been unhappy lately, haven't you?" Qing nodded. Yi Xian asked, "Why not?" Qing-er gently rubbed her head on Yi Xian's shoulder. She said softly, "I'm invincible." Yi Xian, Dedeabi, Qing-er looked up at Yi Xian. "Brother, do you know how strong I am?" Yi Xian shook his head. Qing-er suddenly pointed at the sea in front of her. "Brother, look at this sea. It's hard to say how big the universe is, but I can give you a rough idea. A drop of water is equivalent to a universe." Yi Xian's pupils shrank. "This sea is boundless. In other words, this universe," Qing nodded. "This is still the current universe. Outside of the current universe, there is another universe. I call it the boundless universe. That boundless universe is truly boundless. It has no boundaries, and there is no end to it." Yi Xian frowned. "Even you can't find the end?" Qing-er looked at Yi Xian. "I can." She opened her palm. The walking sword appeared in her hand. "No matter how wide the universe is, it's not wider than my sword. No matter how long the universe is, it's not longer than my sword." To me, whether it's the current universe or the boundless universe, it's just a speck of dust under my feet. Yi Xian was speechless. Qing looked at Yi Xian. If I want to, I can destroy the current universe or the boundless universe with one sword. One sword to destroy. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Amazing. Qing blinked. That's normal. Yi Xian's expression froze. This Qing is getting a little naughty. Qing asked again, brother, you haven't left the current universe, right? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Qing said softly. Then you still have a long way to go. As she spoke, she smiled. That's a good thing. In this way, I can accompany you for a long time. Yi Xian suddenly grabbed Qing's hand. Qing if I become invincible one day, will you leave me? Qing was silent. Yi Xian panicked. He grabbed Qing's shoulder. Answer me. Qing smiled. I won't leave you if you don't want to. Yi Xian smiled. You never lie to me, right? Qing nodded. Yi Xian smiled. How can I bear to let you go? Qing held Yi Xian's hand tightly with her left hand. Leaning her head on Yi Xian's shoulder, she said in a low voice, brother, thank you. Yi Xian was curious. What are you thanking me for? Qing looked at the warm sun in the distance and said softly, thank you for making me feel that my life is meaningful. Without you, my life would be meaningless. Only when you are here can I feel that my life is real. As she spoke, she gently rubbed her head against Yi Xian's shoulder and softly said, I've seen this sunrise countless times, but I've never thought it was good. But now, I feel that this sunrise is extremely beautiful. After saying that, she slowly closed her eyes, and the corners of her mouth unconsciously rose into a charming smile. It's so good to have you. Then let this universe live for a while longer. Dedeabi. P.S. Today is Chinese Valentine's Day. Happy Chinese Valentine's Day. 7017K. Chapter 2362. On the beach, the siblings sat quietly. The sea breeze blew, and the woman's dress fluttered gently. She leaned on Yi Xian's shoulder, and the distant sea and sky merged into one. Picturesque. On the other side, a little girl was looking at Yi Xian and his sister. She was wearing fashionable short-sleeved jeans, and her hair was tied up in a ponytail. She held a stick of tanghulu in her hand. Sitting on her shoulder was a white furry little guy. It was Arya and Little White. Arya looked at Yi Xian and his sister in the distance. Isn't that Little Schwanzi? Why is he here? Little White blinked and waved its claws, but no one knew what it was trying to say. Arya glanced at Tianming, then said, for Little Schwanzi's sake, I won't hit her today. Let's go. With that, she turned and ran. Little White was speechless. On the boulder, Yi Xian said softly, Qing, it's so safe to follow you. Dedeabi was speechless. Qing smiled. I'll take you somewhere. With that, she got up and pulled Yi Xian into the distance. Yi Xian was curious. Where are we going? Qing's lips curled. It's a secret for now. Yi Xian chuckled. Qing, you have to smile more in the future. I like it when you're happy. Qing nodded. I only smile in front of you. Yi Xian shook his head. Having you is the happiest thing in my life. Qing smiled and held Yi Xian's hand tightly. I've lost you once. But now, I won't lose you again. As long as you're alive, the universe will be safe. If you die, the universe will be buried with you. As she spoke, she turned her head and coldly glanced at someone. No one knew who she was looking at. On Yi Xian's waist, Dedeabi trembled slightly. Yi Xian felt warm in his heart. He had to admit that the feeling of being pampered was really good. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian hurriedly said, I founded an academy. As he spoke, he told them about Guanxian Academy and his goal. Looked at Yi Xian. Change the universe? Yi Xian nodded. Do you think it's feasible? After a moment of silence, Qing said, the sword Tao of the human world is certainly feasible. To use the faith of all living beings as a sword, this sword Tao is extraordinary. Not bad. Yi Xian was overjoyed, and quickly asked, if I cultivate to the extreme, how would it compare to Qing'er? Qing'er blinked. This, Yi Xian said seriously, Qing'er, tell me the truth. After a moment of silence, Qing'er said, if I cultivate to the extreme, it should be possible. Possible? Yi Xian's expression froze. Qing'er glanced at Yi Xian's expression, and quickly said, to use the faith of all living beings as a sword, this sword Tao must be extraordinary. If you cultivate to the extreme, you will definitely not be weaker than me. Yi Xian looked at Qing'er, not saying a word. Qing'er hesitated, and then said, I'm speaking the truth, not a single lie. With that, she pointed to the dayabi on Yi Xian's waist. If you don't believe me, you can ask it. The dayabi hurriedly said with a trembling voice, yes, young Master Yi, what your sister said is absolutely true. I guarantee with my life, you should believe her. It was on the verge of tears. Yi Xian rolled his eyes at Qing'er. Just pamper me. Qing'er tidied up Yi Xian's messy collar, and then said softly, in this life, I will only pamper you. Yi Xian held Qing'er's hand tightly, and the siblings walked into the distance. On the other side, a woman was watching Yi Xian and his sister. She was the deputy sect leader of the Milky Way sect, the most powerful force in the Milky Way galaxy, Yang Lianshuang. Beside Yang Lianshuang were 9 people, all of whom were powerful people in the Milky Way galaxy. Yang Lianshuang looked at Yi Xian and his sister in the distance. Do you know why I brought the 9 of you here? The 9 of them shook their heads. Yang Lianshuang looked at Yi Xian, and said softly, do you see that young man? The 9 of them nodded. Yang Lianshuang said, remember his appearance. Remember it well. With that, she turned and left. The 9 of them were confused. At that moment, Yang Lianshuang said again, he is the Milky Way sect's young sect master, and the future master of the Milky Way sect. Hearing that, the 9 of them were shocked. Ever since the Milky Way sect was founded, it had dominated the entire Milky Way galaxy at a terrifying speed, and the entire Milky Way galaxy had gradually entered the immortal cultivation era because of the Milky Way sect. However, the people of the Milky Way sect had never seen the sect master. Everyone was very curious about this sect master, and now, Yang Lianshuang actually said that the young man was the future sect master of the Milky Way sect. In the distance, Yang Lianshuang said again, don't disturb them. The 9 of them bowed deeply to Yi Xian, and then left quietly. Qing'er brought Yi Xian to the foot of a mountain. Yi Xian looked up, and the mountain peak was shrouded in clouds, and it was unpredictable. Yi Xian was a little curious. Qing'er, can you tell me now? Qing'er shook her head. No. Yi Xian smiled. All right. The siblings walked up the mountain. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Qing'er, why are we walking and not flying? Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. Every moment with you is precious. Yi Xian panicked. Qing'er, you make it sound like we are parting forever. Qing'er smiled. Don't worry. No one in this world can kill me. As for parting, we will have to part for a while after this. Yi Xian hurriedly asked. Why? The green girl raised her head and took a look. Because I found something interesting, and I want to verify it. Yi Xian was a little curious. What is it? Qing'er was silent. Yi Xian blinked. Is it a little hard to explain? Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian said with a smile, then don't explain. Wait until I'm strong enough. When I am strong enough, I will know, right? Qing'er lowered her head. Brother, don't be so pressured. If one day you feel life is hard, don't struggle. Invincibility isn't difficult. If you are willing, I can give you a sword energy and you will be invincible in the world. Yi Xian rolled his eyes. Qing'er, you will ruin my Dao heart. A wisp of a brilliant smile appeared on Qing'er's face. Alright, then go work hard. Yi Xian nodded. He believed Qing'er. If Qing'er gave him a sword energy, he would be invincible. But that wasn't his goal. His real goal was to reach Qing'er's level. If he relied on Qing'er's invincibility, he would never be able to reach Qing'er's level. At this time, a voice suddenly came from the side. Hey, look at those two. That man is so handsome, and that woman. My God. There are such beautiful people in this world. Hearing the voice, Yi Xian turned his head. Not far away, two women were looking at him and Qing'er. The clothes of these two women were completely different from the clothes of his universe. The woman on the left was wearing a tight-fitting short-sleeved shirt that tightly wrapped around her chest. Because it was too tight, it made the woman's chest look incomparably large, as big as a watermelon. The woman's short-sleeved shirt was very short, reaching her abdomen. Thus, her belly button was completely exposed. Her lower abdomen was very flat, and her waist was slender. Just her upper body alone was enough to make countless men fall for her. Below her lower abdomen, the scenery was even more beautiful. But because of the problem of harmony, Yi Xian's eyes could only glance over her legs. Her legs were slender, and she wore very tight trousers. This made her legs even more alluring. The woman's appearance was also very beautiful. Her long hair fluttered in the wind. She was sexy and had a trace of fairy-like aura. Beside the woman was a woman wearing sports trousers. Although this woman wasn't devastatingly beautiful, she wasn't bad either. She carried a small bag and was curiously staring at Yi Xian and Qing'er. She was the one who said the words just now. Seeing Yi Xian look over, the woman with the bag hurriedly said excitedly, Sister Muyu, he's looking at us. Look at his clothes. He should be acting. He definitely knows you. I bet he will definitely ask you for your autograph. The woman called Muyu glanced at Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly withdrew his gaze, and then he pulled Qing'er along as they continued up the mountain. Muyu was slightly stunned when she saw Yi Xian and Qing'er leave. Meanwhile, the woman by her side spoke with surprise, he doesn't know Big Sister Muyu? That shouldn't be the case. Meanwhile, Muyu suddenly walked swiftly towards the distance, and it didn't take long for her to arrive before Yi Xian and Qing'er. She sized up Yi Xian and Qing'er before she looked at Yi Xian and said, Are the two of you antiquarian lovers? Yi Xian was slightly surprised, antiquarian lovers? Muyu said, You're dressed very antiquarian. Yi Xian was stunned for a moment, and then he smiled and said, Sort of. Muyu gazed at Yi Xian and said, Are you interested in acting? You'll definitely become famous if you're willing. Acting. Yi Xian blinked and said, Miss, I'm not interested in acting. Then he pulled Qing'er and was about to leave. Muyu suddenly said, You don't know me? Yi Xian looked at Muyu and said, No. Muyu stared at Yi Xian and said nothing. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then said, Miss, I'm from another world. Muyu's expression was calm. Are you from Mars? Mars? Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss, this is my first time in the Milky Way. I'm not familiar with this place, so there might be many differences in our conversation, so. Ridiculous. Muyu frowned and was a little displeased. If you're not willing, just say it. Why do you have to lie to me? Do you think I? At this time, Qing'er suddenly flicked her sleeves, and a sword ray flew out. Boom! Thousands of feet away, a huge mountain suddenly turned into dust. Muyu was stunned on the spot, and she looked at Qing'er with a face full of terror. You, are you a legendary sword immortal? No, you should be a great sword immortal, right? Great sword immortal. Qing'er was slightly stunned, and then she turned to look at Yi Xian, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Brother, I'm a great sword immortal. Yi Xian said seriously, amazing. The brother and sister looked at each other and smiled. At this moment, they seemed to have returned to the beginning. At the side, Muyu looked at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, are you also a cultivator? Yi Xian nodded, and then he opened his palm, and a sword suddenly flew out and shot into the sky. Muyu looked at the sword at the end of the horizon, and said with a trembling voice, You look even stronger than your sister. Yi Xian said seriously, of course, I'm invincible under the 3 swords, and I'm also invincible above the 3 swords. After saying that, he looked at Qing'er, is that right? Qing'er blinked, and then gave him a thumbs up, and smiled sweetly, brother, you're always a god. Chapter 2363. Haha. Yi Xian laughed, then pulled Qing'er towards the top of the mountain. Muyu and Qing'er were still petrified. After a long time, Muyu came back to her senses and said with a trembling voice, they really are sword immortals. They really are sword immortals. Although the Milky Way had entered the immortal cultivation era, there were still too few swordsmen. Moreover, they had only seen a sword slash through a mountain in television dramas. There really are sword immortals in the world. Muyu was stunned for a long time, then said, let's go to the top of Qing'an Peak. Saying so, she ran madly towards the top of the mountain. Yi Xian pulled Qing'er to the top of the mountain. The moment he set foot on the top, Yi Xian was a little surprised. The view at the top of the mountain was vast and boundless. Looking up, he could see a blue sky and white clouds. Looking ahead, he saw a towering ancient tree not far away. Beside the ancient tree was a waterfall, water splashing into a pool. Below his feet was a Xiao Dao made of bluestone. At the end of the Xiao Dao was the ancient tree. Above the ancient tree, there was a wooden hut. In front of the wooden hut, there was a small dog, and at this moment, the dog was shivering. Yi Xian turned to look at Qing'er, this is? Qing'er looked at the wooden hut in the distance, do you know who is inside? Yi Xian shook his head. Qing'er looked calm, the owner of the pen. Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed, he turned to look at the wooden hut. This wooden hut is actually the owner of Dedeabi? A super mighty? Qing'er looked at the wooden hut, sword. Sword? Yi Xian was puzzled. At this moment, the wooden door suddenly opened, and a sword slowly floated out. Seeing this sword, Yi Xian was stunned. The azure profound sword. Yi Xian opened his palm and the Qingxian sword flew into his hand. The Qingxian sword didn't look much different from before, but there was an additional word on the hilt, human. Humans? To the side, Qing'er frowned. Just one word? Don't you have 6? As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and the walking sword suddenly appeared in her hand. Boom! All of a sudden, a terrifying pressure enveloped the entire mountain. In front of the wooden house, the puppy began to tremble violently, terrified to the extreme. At this moment, a sigh came from the wooden house. His strength is on the weak side, so he can't control the 6-syllable Sanskrit. Currently, he can't even control the smallest word, human. Tian Ming stared at the wooden hut in silence. The voice continued, I know you want to kill me, but you should know that from the beginning until now, I haven't done anything to let you and your sister down. Tian Ming stared at the wooden house for a long time before pulling Yi Xian's hand and leaving. Back then, you gave my brother a chance to live. Today, I'll spare your life. Clear. Soon, the siblings disappeared into the distance. A long time later, another sigh came from inside the wooden house. I'm really not doing well. A moment later, the wooden house's door opened. A man walked out and gently stroked the puppy, then smiled. Ah, Huang, let's go. With that, he walked into the distance. Qing'er brought Yi Xian to the seaside, and the siblings strolled slowly. Qing'er whispered, "Brother, you should go back." Yi Xian stopped and looked at Qing'er. "Are you leaving?" Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian asked, "Where to?" Qing'er smiled and said nothing. Yi Xian rolled his eyes at Qing'er. "Fine. I won't ask." Qing'er suddenly hugged Yi Xian, resting her head on Yi Xian's chest. "Brother, I'll wait for you at the end of the martial path. Don't make me wait too long. It's lonely." Yi Xian smiled. "Of course." Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. "I believe in you." With that, she opened her palm, and Xiao Ta appeared. She handed Xiao Ta to Yi Xian. "I've modified this pagoda. Keep it." Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta and smiled. "Xiao Ta, long time no see." Xiao Ta didn't answer. Qing'er frowned. Xiao Ta quickly said, "Master, I missed you so much." Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta was too hypocritical. Qing'er smiled. "Brother, let's go back." Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly asked, "Qing'er, I have a girl by my side. Her name is Qingqiu. Do you know her background?" Qing'er nodded. "I do." Yi Xian quickly asked, "She is?" Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. "For you, she protected the third dimension and suppressed the fourth dimension. Since the birth of the universe, only one person could reach my level in swordsmanship. It's her." With that, she paused. "But it's just a possibility." Yi Xian was shocked. To reach Qing'er's level? It's possible. Yi Xian had to admit that he was really shocked. It should be known that Qing'er never put anyone in her eyes. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian's pupils shrank. He said with a trembling voice, She is you." Qing'er shook her head. "I used to be her." Yi Xian was speechless. Qing'er said softly, "Treat her well. She used to be very bitter. She lived like a year for hundreds of thousands of years. That kind of loneliness and suffering." Then, she shook her head and didn't continue. Yi Xian nodded. "I will." Qing'er waved her right hand. Yi Xian's body became illusory. He disappeared from the place. After Yi Xian disappeared, Qing'er's expression became cold. She looked up at the sky. Her eyes were as cold as ice. At this time, Qing'er retracted her gaze and turned to look not far away. There stood a little girl. It was Arya. Little White was on her shoulder. Seeing Qing'er's gaze, Arya's eyelids twitched. Wasn't she very gentle just now? Why did she change so quickly? Little White blinked and waved its little paws. No one knew what it was trying to express. Qing'er looked at Arya and didn't speak. Arya hesitated, then said, "I'm just passing by." Then, she turned and ran away. Not long after, Yi Xian returned to Guanxian Academy. After returning to the academy, Yi Xian looked at the Qingxian sword in his hand. The word human on the hilt was very conspicuous. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Brother Bai, can you say this word?" Dadayabi said, "The word human of the 6-syllable Sanskrit mantra. This word has an extremely terrifying power of the human world. It's the same as your power of the human world. This word is condensed by countless predecessors. It's sincere and benevolent. Only a benevolent and righteous person can activate this word. Master gave this word to you. Obviously, Master approves of what you're going to do now. The power of the human world." After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly activated the Qingxian sword. Hum. The Qingxian sword suddenly let out a sword cry. The next moment, the word human on the hilt suddenly trembled. Soon, an extremely terrifying power flowed into the Qingxian sword. Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment, he felt like his body was about to collapse. He was shocked and quickly stopped. The terrifying power instantly dispersed like a tide. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at the Qingxian sword in his hand with eyes full of disbelief. This, Dedeabi said, the power of the human world that you activated just now was less than 10%. Now, you can't even control 10% of the power of the human world. Yi Xian looked at the Qingxian sword in his hand. He was still shocked. The power of this word was so terrifying. Moreover, this word was the weakest word in the 6-syllable Sanskrit mantra. One could imagine how terrifying the remaining 5 words were. Yi Xian sighed softly. He still had a long way to go. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian gently waved the Qingxian sword. He was overjoyed because he found that the Qingxian sword's previous functions were still there. Moreover, it had become even more terrifying. With the Qingxian sword, he could travel freely in the universe again, ignoring all the obstacles in the universe. In addition, he also found that the Qingxian sword seemed to have become sharper. Sharper. Thinking of this, he held the sword and slashed at his body. Chi. With this slash, a shallow sword mark appeared on Arya's armor. It could hurt. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was instantly excited. Even Arya's armor could be hurt. Then, what else in this world couldn't be broken by the Qingxian sword? The best defensive equipment and the best offensive equipment were in his hands. Thinking of this, Yi Xian couldn't help but laugh. The feeling of invincibility was back. As soon as this thought arose, Yi Xian became vigilant. He couldn't have this kind of thought. Usually, when he had this kind of thought, he would be beaten up in less than 3 days. He had to keep a low profile. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian opened his palm. Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. He smiled and said, "Xiao Ta, long time no see." Xiao Ta said, "Young lord, can I say something from the bottom of my heart?" Yi Xian nodded. "Of course, I've always been a democratic person." After a moment of silence, Xiao Ta said, "Young lord, to say something that might not be too modest, I'm now the real #1 tower in the universe. I think it's a bit of a waste of talent for me to follow you." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "A little." Xiao Ta said seriously, "Young lord, have you heard of a saying?" Yi Xian was a bit curious. "What saying?" Xiao Ta said, "In the Milky Way, there's a saying that goes, invincibility depends on the 3 swords, and those who fall under the 3 swords depend on Xiao Ta." Yi Xian, Dedeabi, Xiao Hun. P.S. Sorry, today's update is late. I don't want to explain, everyone scold me. Chapter 2364. Invincibility depends on the 3 swords, and the 3 swords depends on Xiao Ta. Hearing Xiao Ta's words, Yi Xian was silent. This Xiao Ta was really arrogant. And not just ordinary arrogance. Of course, he still understood. Not to mention Xiao Ta, even if he followed Qing, for a period of time, he would feel that everyone in this world were ants. At this moment, Xiao Ta said again, "Young master, my current idea is to establish my own sect." Establish my own sect. Xiao Hun couldn't help but say, "Xiao Ta, you, don't do this." Xiao Ta said indifferently, "I also don't want to be so arrogant, but my strength doesn't allow me to." Xiao Hun, Xiao Ta said again, "Young master, in order to prevent you from thinking that I'm showing off, we can spar, a friendly spar. Don't worry, for the sake of master and sister Tianming, I won't kill you." Spar. Yi Xian smiled and said, "We can spar." Xiao Ta said, "Let's change places." Yi Xian nodded, "Okay." As soon as he said that, he disappeared with Xiao Ta. The next moment, he and Xiao Ta appeared in an unknown galaxy. Yi Xian looked around, then smiled and said, Xiao Ta, I can use Xiao Hun to hit you, is that okay? Xiao Ta laughed, I'm invincible, you can do as you please. Yi Xian, Dadeabi's voice suddenly sounded, I've never seen such an arrogant tower. What the hell is this? Xiao Ta smiled disdainfully, a lousy pen dares to judge me, what a joke. Whether it's a person or an object, the most lamentable thing is that you don't know what you're doing, which is ignorance. You ignorant Dadeabi, do you know who I am? Tower, the number one tower in the universe. First there was me, Xiao Ta, then there will be heaven, do you understand? Yi Xian, F***ck. Dadeabi couldn't help but say, first you, then the heavens? Are you crazy? Xiao Ta said indifferently, ignorant. Dadeabi, at the side, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Xiao Ta, can we start now? Xiao Ta said, Little Lord, you attack first. Because I'm afraid that if I attack first, you won't have the chance to attack. Yi Xian laughed. All right. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped up and opened his palm, causing the azure sword to appear in his hand. In the next moment, a terrifying force swept out from within his body as Yi Xian raised his sword. Qi. The space-time in front of Yi Xian split apart. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xian appeared in a universe. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta who was in the current universe. With a thought, 4 streaks of sword gleam slashed at Xiao Ta's body. Instant invincibility. Moreover, it was the instant invincibility performed by the azure sword. Yi Xian could be said to have given his all in this attack. In the current world, the moment the 4 streaks of sword gleam appeared, Xiao Ta was instantly shocked. F***ck. F***ck. In the next moment, boom. With Xiao Ta as the center, everything within a perimeter was destroyed. Tens of millions of miles of starfields were destroyed with one sword. Fortunately, this was a dead starfield. Otherwise, who knew how many living beings would have been killed? Crack. At this moment, a cracking sound was suddenly heard in the field. Around Xiao Ta, more and more cracks appeared. In the blink of an eye, the entire Xiao Ta's body was covered in cracks. It was extremely terrifying. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of Xiao Ta. Xiao Ta's voice trembled as he said, Young Lord. You're really serious. Yi Xian smiled and said, Xiao Ta, I'm very sorry. I didn't expect you to be so fragile. Fortunately, because I only used 20% of my strength. If I used a few more percent, Xiao Ta, you would, at this point, he didn't continue speaking. Xiao Ta, Yi Xian walked in front of Xiao Ta and looked at Xiao Ta who was covered in cracks. He sighed softly and said, Xiao Ta. Why are you so weak? Xiao Ta, Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. Sigh, I respect your thoughts. You should go and establish your own sect. After all, if you follow me now, it doesn't seem to be of much use. Take care. After speaking, he turned and left. In the same place, Xiao Ta hesitated for a moment and then said, Young Lord, I was actually just joking just now, Yi Xian had already disappeared into the distance. Xiao Ta. Yi Xian returned to Guanxian Academy. He lay on a chair, crossed his legs, and read a book. During this period of time, he liked reading more and more. Because every time he read, his heart could quickly calm down. He liked this kind of quiet state of himself. At this time, Little Soul suddenly said, Young Lord, Xiao Ta is very arrogant. But he doesn't have bad intentions. Little Soul still didn't want Yi Xian to give up on Xiao Ta. Because she and Xiao Ta had known each other for a long time and could be regarded as true friends. Although Xiao Ta was very arrogant most of the time, hearing Little Soul's words, Yi Xian put down the ancient book in his hand and said with a smile, I know. Little Soul giggled, Young Lord deliberately hid it, right? Yi Xian glanced at the Qingxian sword and said with a smile, "Little soul, you've become smarter now." Little soul said, "Young lord, I actually miss you. And Xiao Ta, he often talks about you in the Milky Way. In short, it's really good to be able to see you." Yi Xian smiled slightly. "I'm also very happy to be able to see all of you." Naturally, he was not angry with Xiao Ta. Xiao Ta and he had gone through life and death together so many times. Why would he be angry with Xiao Ta over such a small matter? At this time, Qing Qiu came from the side. She walked to Yi Xian's side and then handed the tea in her hand to Yi Xian. She smiled slightly. "Brother, have some tea." "Brother." "Not brother, young lord." Yi Xian glanced at Qing Qiu. He smiled slightly, and then he stood up and said softly, "Sit next to me." Qing Qiu nodded, and then she sat next to Yi Xian. She naturally hugged Yi Xian's arms. Yi Xian smiled lightly. "Little girl, are you tired recently?" Qing Qiu shook her head. "Not tired." Yi Xian turned to look at Qing Qiu. Qing Qiu blinked. "What's wrong?" Yi Xian smiled slightly. "You've actually reached the ancient god realm." The corners of Qing Qiu's mouth curled up slightly. "Is it amazing?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Very." A brilliant smile appeared on Qing Qiu's face. She was extremely happy. Yi Xian gently rubbed Qing Qiu's head, and said with a smile, "When will you reach the ancestor god realm?" Qing Qiu blinked. "I'm not telling you." Yi Xian rolled his eyes. Qing Qiu giggled, and then she stood up. "Brother, I'm going to work." After saying that, she turned around and skipped into the distance. She was very happy. Looking at Qing Qiu in the distance, a complicated look flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. After saying that, he slowly closed his eyes. He would never allow the tragedy of the past to happen again. Everyone must live well. At this time, Xiao Ta appeared beside Yi Xian. Xiao Ta hesitated, and then said, "Young lord." Yi Xian smiled, then opened his palm, and Xiao Ta flew into his hand. "Xiao Ta, did you have fun in the Milky Way?" Xiao Ta hurriedly said, "Yes, the Milky Way is very fun." And Arya and Xiao Bai. Arya always likes to provoke Sister Tianming, so she gets beaten every day. Yi Xian laughed. In fact, he was a little regretful in this trip to the Milky Way, because he didn't get to see the Milky Way, let alone see Arya and Xiao Bai. He still missed Arya and Xiao Bai very much. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Brother Bai, why doesn't your master allow outsiders to enter the Milky Way?" After a moment of silence, Dedeabi said, "The Milky Way's martial arts civilization is very low. If outsiders enter it, it will pose a great threat to that world. Therefore, Master set up a restriction to prevent any cultivators from entering the Milky Way, until..." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Until Arya and Xiao Bai arrive there, right?" Dedeabi said, "Yes, now the Milky Way is gradually connected with the outside world. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing." Sigh. Yi Xian smiled slightly. "Don't worry, in the future, I will protect the Milky Way." Dedeabi, Yi Xian laughed, then looked up into the depths of the starry sky. "Counting my fingers, the people of the clan should be arriving soon." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly retracted his gaze. He looked at the door in the distance. There, a young man slowly walked over. Yi Xian glanced at the young man, smiled and said, "From the clan?" The young man walked in front of Yi Xian, smiled and said, "Let me introduce myself. I am the 7th young master of the clan." 7th young master. Yi Xian nodded slightly. "So it is the 7th young master. I have heard a lot about you." A trace of surprise flashed in the 7th young master's eyes. "You know me?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "I have heard of you." The 7th young master was a bit interested. "Where have you heard of me?" Yi Xian was speechless. "You idiot, I was just being polite. Why are you asking so many questions?" Yi Xian smiled slightly. "Previously, the 9th young master said, there is only one person in the clan who can threaten his prince position, and that is you, the seventh young master. You are like jade, the seventh young master is unparalleled. The seventh young master laughed, this ninth younger brother of mine, although he is a bit useless, he is still a very honest person. Having said that, he sat in front of Yi Xian, then smiled and said, Yi Xian, I have investigated you. I know that there are two mysterious swordsmen behind you, one is the man in green, the other is a woman in a plain dress, am I right? Yi Xian nodded, yes. The seventh young master smiled and said, these two people are your biggest support, am I right? Yi Xian thought about it, then honestly said, no problem. The seventh young master stared at Yi Xian, I want to see them. Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. The seventh young master smiled slightly, you look very shocked, I will say it again, I want to see them. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, you are the one the clan sent to deal with me? The seventh young master nodded, yes. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth slightly raised, good. The seventh young master frowned, good what? Yi Xian blinked, smiled and said, I like enemies like you the most. Chapter 2365. Haha. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the seventh young master suddenly laughed. Seeing the seventh young master laughing, Yi Xian's expression was calm as he gently drank the spiritual tea Qing Qiu brought him. Kill him directly? Of course he could do it. However, this was too boring. Because if he killed the seventh young master directly, the clan would not let it go. On the contrary, they would send more powerful enemies. Since that was the case, he could kill the person in front of him slowly to buy more time for himself. This way, he could avoid the situation where he couldn't be handsome for more than 3 days. At this time, the seventh young master shook his head and smiled, Young Master Yi, are you looking down on me? Yi Xian sternly said, no, on the contrary, I respect the seventh young master very much. The seventh young master looked at Yi Xian, why? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then smiled and said, because the seventh young master has the bearing of a young master from a large clan. The clan's strength is 100 times stronger than mine, but the seventh young master didn't act arrogantly when he came here, unlike the ninth young master, whose every movement exuded an air of superiority. But the seventh young master is different. The seventh young master's bearing is extraordinary, amiable and approachable. In my heart, he is the young master of a large clan. Even if I die in the hands of the seventh young master, I, Yi Xian, will have no complaints or regrets. The seventh young master laughed. Yi Xian, you may be a little weak, but you are quite an honest person. It's a pity that you offended the heavenly prestige of my clan. Otherwise, I would have accepted you as a guest and brought you to my clan. Yi Xian sighed, if the one I met that day was the seventh young master, Yi Xian would not have made the same mistake again. As he said this, his expression suddenly became angry. Seventh young master, tell me, if you met someone like the ninth young master, you wouldn't be able to kill him? Wouldn't be able to kill him? The seventh young master nodded slightly, that ninth brother of mine is indeed not a good person. Ninth young master was speechless. Yi Xian nodded, seventh young master, even though I've killed ninth young master, I bear no ill will towards the main clan. The main clan is one of the largest clans in the world, even if I was given 10 guts, I wouldn't dare to go against the main clan. If it wasn't for that ninth young master going too far, why would I, Yi Xian, have the intention to kill him? The seventh young master sighed in a low voice, Yi Xian, I sympathize with your experience. After all, that ninth brother of mine is indeed a good-for-nothing. Not to mention you, even I wanted to kill him back in the clan. Perhaps you don't know this, but in the clan, aside from my second sister, he doesn't care about anyone else. Moreover, he often humiliates me in front of my face, saying that I'm a pig with a human head and an idiot. When he spoke up to hear, a wisp of ruthlessness flashed through his eyes. Such people deserve to die. Yi Xian quickly nodded. Death is not to be regretted. The seventh young master looked at Yi Xian. This time, the clan has given me a mission to kill you and wipe out 10 of your clans. Yi Xian was silent. The 7th young master suddenly said, I was going to do the same, but after coming here, I feel that you're a very honest person. You're a good person, so I've decided to give you a way out. I want to bring you back to the clan. If I bring you back, I can report to the clan and you can avoid the disaster of wiping out 10 clans. What do you think? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, if I go back with you, will the clan kill me? The 7th young master nodded. They should. Yi Xian was silent. The 7th young master looked at Yi Xian. My clan's strength is beyond your imagination. If you don't go back with me, then my clan will slaughter this world and everyone related to you. At that time, it won't be just you who will die, but every living being in this universe. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, I'll go back with you. The 7th young master nodded. Then let's go. Yi Xian smiled. All right. He left just like that. Yi Xian followed the 7th young master and arrived at an expanse of the starry sky. In this expanse of the starry sky, Yi Xian saw 36 ancient God realm experts. 36 of them. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. This clan really does have the ability to be domineering. All 36 of them were stunned when they saw Yi Xian. The 7th young master's expression was calm. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, all of them started to travel through space. The clan actually had teleportation formations all over the universe. However, this place was truly too far away from the clan, so they had to travel through space first. On the way, the 7th young master glanced at Yi Xian, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He didn't kill Yi Xian because he had his own plans. The 9th young master came to find Yi Xian, but not only did he not get rid of Yi Xian, he was even killed by Yi Xian. However, he was able to bring Yi Xian back to the clan with just a few words. This would definitely make the patriarch and the elders think highly of him. At the side, Yi Xian closed his eyes. The reason why he agreed to go to the clan was naturally because he didn't want the battlefield to be in the universe of gods. If they fought there, the entire universe of gods would not be spared. Therefore, he decided to go to the clan. Yi Xian suddenly sighed. This trip to the clan would probably be filled with fighting and killing again. He had to admit that he was already tired of this kind of fighting and killing. Wasn't it good for everyone to develop peacefully? But how could life always be smooth sailing? The 7th young master suddenly said, Young Master Yi, why are you sighing? Yi Xian smiled and said, I'm afraid of death. The 7th young master was slightly stunned, then he laughed, Young Master Yi, you're really interesting. If we weren't enemies, I would be willing to be friends with you. Yi Xian was speechless. The 7th young master shook his head. Unfortunately, you've killed someone from my clan. My clan will definitely not let you off. Don't worry, I can't guarantee anything else, but I can guarantee that my clan will definitely not harm that cosmos or your kin. Yi Xian glanced at the 7th young master and said with a smile, all right. The 7th young master looked into the distance and slowly closed his eyes. He didn't know what his words today would bring him. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The moment she appeared, a terrifying force directly suppressed everyone present. Yi Xian frowned slightly as he looked at the woman. She wore a long white dress, had shoulder-length hair, and eyes as clear as water. She held an ancient scroll in her hand. The 7th young master was slightly stunned when he saw this woman, then his expression turned ugly. Second sister. The second young miss of the clan, Zhong Bai. Zhong Bai glanced at Yi Xian, and then she said, leave him to me. The 7th young master was slightly stunned, and then he spoke in a low voice, second sister, he's my. Zhong Bai gazed at the 7th young master, is there something wrong with you? The 7th young master's expression instantly changed, and he hurriedly said, second sister. I'm fine. Zhongbai nodded slightly. Report back and say that I took him away. I'll give everyone an explanation then. The seventh young master was slightly hesitant. Zongbai's expression was calm. Little seventh, I remember that I haven't guided you in a very long time. Why don't I guide you now? The seventh young master immediately said, no. Big sister, I'll report back right now. As soon as he finished speaking, he led the 36 people behind him and vanished into the distance. They ran very quickly. Zhongbai walked over to Yi Xian, and then she gazed at Yi Xian. Shall we go somewhere else to talk? Yi Xian nodded, all right. Zhongbai waved her right hand, and in the next moment, the two of them vanished on the spot. When they reappeared, they were already at the peak of a mountain. From this position, the mountains in the distance were connected to each other, and the peaks of the mountains were shrouded in clouds and mist. It was like a paradise. Zhongbai suddenly said, with young Master Ye's strength, killing them should be a piece of cake, but young Master Yi wants to go with them to the clan. As she spoke up to this point, she turned to look at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, do you not want to fight in the universe of gods, or do you want to destroy the clan? Or, both? Yi Xian smiled. How should I address you, miss? Zhongbai looked at Yi Xian. Zhongbai. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Miss Zhongbai, I'm only at the ancient god realm. I'm not as powerful as you say. Zhongbai shook her head. Young Master Yi, you should be more powerful than I say. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Zhongbai, did you bring me here to have a chat with me? Zhongbai looked at Yi Xian. I'm here to stop you from going to the clan. Yi Xian frowned. Why? Zhongbai stared at Yi Xian. If you go to the clan, you will have to fight to the death. If my clan kills you, there will be a disaster. Yi Xian was silent. Zhongbai continued, if my clan can't find someone, then he must be someone much stronger than my clan. Moreover, there are two possibilities for young Master Yi to make Dedeabi follow him. First, young Master Yi has obtained Dedeabi's recognition. Second, Dedeabi was forced to follow young Master Yi. Regardless of the reason, it's not something my clan can afford to offend. My clan naturally isn't afraid of Dedeabi's clone, but Dedeabi's real body isn't something my clan can contend against. And if Dedeabi is forced to follow young Master Yi, then it means that the person behind young Master Yi is stronger than Dedeabi. My clan can't afford to offend him. Yi Xian glanced at Zhongbai, but didn't say anything. Zhongbai turned her head and looked into the distance, softly saying, Young Master Yi, I was born in the clan, but I'm a girl. Therefore, I have no fate to inherit the clan's position. Of course, it's also because I never had any thoughts about that position. I had already left, not wanting to interfere with the clan's matters. But in the end, I couldn't let it go. After all, the clan gave birth to me and raised me. I can't resent them just because they didn't let me be the clan head. Of course, I also know that the clan is like the sun in the sky right now. They don't care about anyone. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, Young Master Yi, my clan controls hundreds of large and small universes. There are trillions of living beings that rely on my clan to survive. Now, my clan is muddle-headed and can harm trillions of living beings with a single thought. May I be so bold as to ask young Master Yi to give me some time? Let me mediate the grievances between young Master Yi and my clan. As she spoke, she bowed deeply. Yi Xian was silent. Zhongbai continued, this matter is my clan's fault. This calamity started because of my clan, but the trillions of living beings aren't at fault. The leaders are muddle-headed, and the ones suffering are the common people. Today, if young Master Yi goes to the clan, my clan will definitely be exterminated. All living beings under my clan will be consigned to eternal damnation. With that, she bowed deeply once more. Young Master Yi, please give me a chance. Give my clan a chance. Give all living beings under my clan a chance. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, all right. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a strand of sword intent suddenly shot into the sky from within his body. Mortal realm sword intent. This sword intent of the mortal world pierced through the clouds, and in an instant, the entire galaxy trembled. His sword intent had reached the ancient god realm. Moreover, there was another strand of sword intent within this strand of sword intent. Good. The sword will of the human realm contained the path of kindness. A good thought can cross thousands of mountains and rivers. P.S. Casting a monthly vote is also a good deed. 7017K. Chapter 2366. His sword intent had broken through. Zhongbai looked at Yi Xian with a complicated gaze and a trace of fear. Although his sword intent was only at the primordial god realm, its might made her heart palpitate. Yi Xian looked at the depths of the starry sky with a complicated gaze. Kindness. The stronger a person was, the more benevolent he was, the more he could change the fate of countless living beings. Conversely, if a person was powerful enough to do as he pleased, then it would be a disaster for all living beings. But just now, his kindness had allowed his sword intent to break through once more. Even if no one thanked him for his kindness, please don't lose what's most precious to you. Because one day, you might be able to obtain good karma. Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and looked at Zhongbai. Miss Zhongbai, you're a sensible person with great wisdom. Why doesn't the clan allow you to be the patriarch? Zhongbai shook her head. I'm a woman. If I were to become the patriarch, they're afraid that the clan would become someone else's dowry. Yi Xian smiled. So, you're giving up? Zhongbai looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. It's very simple if you want to mediate the enmity between me and the clan. You have to be the patriarch. Otherwise, it's useless. They'll still come looking for trouble with me, and I'll still kill them. In this way, the conflict between me and the clan will only grow. Zhongbai fell silent. Yi Xian smiled and said, You have feelings for the clan, but you should understand that among the younger generation of the clan, no one is more outstanding than you. As the clan leader, you have the power to protect the clan better. Zhongbai fell silent for a moment before she said, I understand. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. Actually, if Zhongbai really became the patriarch, then it might not be a bad thing for him. After all, it was always better to have a friend than an enemy at any time. Zhongbai looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, I'm going to the Paradise Realm. Are you willing to come with me? Yi Xian was curious. Immortal Realm? Zhongbai nodded. It's an extremely mysterious place. That place is currently the most dangerous place that we know of. 2 universe-enlightened ancestral god realm experts of my sect have entered that place in the past, but they've never returned. Yi Xian smiled and said, Don't tell me you're trying to lead me there and divert the trouble to someone else. Zhongbai shook his head. I won't harm you. Yi Xian was curious. Why? Zhongbai looked at Yi Xian. Because I can't kill you. Even if the entire clan mobilized all their forces, they would not be able to kill young Master Yi. Right? Yi Xian looked straight at Zhongbai. Is it because I have a Dedeabi? Zhongbai smiled. No. Yi Xian was curious. Then why? Zhongbai smiled lightly. Because young Master Yi speaks of Dedeabi very casually. So casually that you don't think Dedeabi is extraordinary. Yi Xian fell silent. Zhongbai smiled. Young Master Yi, let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she flicked her sleeve. Bang! The space in front of her suddenly split apart, and a space-time tunnel appeared before them. Yi Xian said, If I go with you to the Paradise Realm, can you guarantee that the clan won't go to the universe of gods to look for trouble with my academy? Zhongbai nodded. I can. Yi Xian looked at Zhongbai in silence. Zhongbai chuckled. Although I'm not the patriarch, I'm the protector of the sect. My authority is only second to the patriarch's. Telling them not to cause trouble for you is something I can do. Yi Xian asked, what if they come? Zhong Bai said, I'll help you kill them. Yi Xian looked at Zhong Bai. A moment later, he smiled. Let's go. With that said, the two disappeared into the space-time tunnel. Clan. Inside the hall, the seventh young master stood respectfully. On both sides were the various elders of the clan. The patriarch, Zhong Shou, suddenly said, she took Yi Xian away? The seventh young master nodded. Zhong Shou frowned. Why did she take Yi Xian away? The seventh young master shook his head. I don't know. Zhong Shou fell silent. At this moment, an elder suddenly said, no matter what, that Yi Xian must die. Zhong Shou glanced at the elder. Then you go kill him? The elder's expression froze. Although Zhong Bai was a member of the younger generation, her status in the clan was second only to the patriarch. Be it status or strength. Zhong Bai had reached the peak of the half-step ancestor god realm a long time ago. The most terrifying thing was that she could already fight ancestor god realm experts at that time. Zhong Shou suddenly said, send someone to keep an eye on them. Report immediately if anything happens. With that, he stood up and left. In the hall, the crowd dispersed. In the spacetime tunnel, Yi Xian and Zhong Bai were shuttling swiftly. Yi Xian suddenly looked at the ancient book in Zhong Bai's hand. Miss Zhong Bai, what book is this? Zhong Bai smiled. It's a book about realms written by Miss Qin. Yi Xian smiled. According to what I know, you want to swallow the immortal treasure pavilion, right? Zhong Bai fell silent. Yi Xian asked softly, do you know Qin Guan? Zhong Bai shook her head. Not much. Yi Xian shook his head. You dare to target the immortal treasure pavilion when you don't know much? Miss Zhong Bai, let me tell you, they can't contact Miss Qin Guan now. Once they do, I'm afraid your clan will be consigned to eternal damnation. Zhong Bai turned to look at Yi Xian. Is young Master Yi familiar with Pavilion Master Qin? Yi Xian nodded. She's my friend. Zhong Bai looked into the distance and said softly, when the clan wanted to target the immortal treasure pavilion, I suggested it, but they didn't accept it. The breadth of this Pavilion Master Qin's knowledge is rarely seen. Yi Xian smiled. Not only is she knowledgeable, but she's also very strong. Miss Zhong Bai, to be honest, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult for you to save your clan, especially when your clan attacked the immortal treasure pavilion. I know Miss Qin Guan's temper, she won't let your clan off. Zhong Bai glanced at Yi Xian and hesitated to speak. Yi Xian smiled. Don't look at me. Miss Qin Guan is very good at forging swords. I can't deal with her. Unless. At this point, he suddenly stopped talking. Zhong Bai quickly asked. Unless what? Yi Xian shook his head. Miss Zhong Bai, you've overlooked a problem. Right now, you're the only one in the clan who wants to change the clan and form good karma. As for the others, they're all on the brink of death. If you want to change the clan, you can only become the patriarch. Only then can you change the clan and save it. Otherwise, whatever you do now is meaningless because you're not the patriarch. Understand? Zhong Bai nodded. Understood. This time, I'm going to the immortal domain to find a senior of my clan. I need his support. With his support, I can become the patriarch without bloodshed. Yi Xian nodded. Speaking of which, what kind of place is this immortal domain? Zhong Bai shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian smiled. Then aren't you afraid of not coming back? Zhong Bai replied. Afraid? Yi Xian was surprised. Then? You're still going? Zhong Bai glanced at Yi Xian. Because I'm afraid, that's why I'm bringing you. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. Zhong Bai said seriously. I think if you come with me, we should be able to come back alive, right? Yi Xian said solemnly. What makes you think so? Zhong Bai looked at Yi Xian and said seriously. I think no one can kill you, at least in this universe. Yi Xian was curious. Why are you so confident in me? Is it because of your guesses just now? Zhong Bai countered with a question. Can anyone kill you? Yi Xian thought about it and said, yes, but they're all my people. Dedeabi, Zhong Bai looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian said seriously, I'm not lying. Zhong Bai nodded. I believe you. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. You really believe me? Zhong Bai nodded. Of course. You have no reason to lie to me, right? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. How rare. This was the first time someone believed him when he spoke the truth. Zhong Bai's eyes flashed with worry. With the clan's current strength, there were indeed very few opponents. But now, the clan was courting death by provoking two people who weren't afraid of the clan. AI. Zhong Bai sighed softly. Just as Yi Xian said, if she wanted to change the clan and save the clan, she had to become the clan leader. Only by becoming the clan leader would she be able to change everything. At this thought, Zhong Bai looked into the distance and sped up. Yi Xian glanced at Zhong Bai. Why was this clan different from his own? The clan valued males over females, but his own clan valued females over males. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. What a sin. At this moment, Zhong Bai suddenly said, we're almost there. Yi Xian looked into the distance. At the end of his vision, he saw a white vortex. Yi Xian was curious. Miss Zhong Bai, what kind of place is this paradise? Zhong Bai shook her head. It's a very mysterious place. As for what kind of place it is, I don't know either. I only know that my ancestor once entered it and never came out again. As she spoke, she glanced at Yi Xian. Are you afraid? Yi Xian blinked. Do you know that I have a nickname? Zhong Bai was curious. What nickname? Yi Xian smiled. Legacy Killer. Zhong Bai was speechless. Soon, the two of them were getting closer to the white vortex. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly felt a trace of uneasiness. Sensing this, Yi Xian frowned slightly. Brother Bai, is it dangerous inside? Dedeabi said, that depends on how you look at it. Yi Xian was puzzled. What do you mean? Dedeabi was silent for a moment. If you die, you definitely won't die, but, Yi Xian was curious. But what? Dedeabi said indifferently. But you might be beaten badly. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Then he smiled. I won't. Dedeabi said, don't be too confident. Yi Xian looked at the white vortex that was getting closer and closer. He smiled. If I become a younger brother again and get beaten badly again, I will recognize Xiao Ta as my master. Xiao Ta immediately said, really? Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 2367. Hearing Xiao Ta's words, Yi Xian's face immediately turned cold. This guy has a rebellious streak. Looks like I have to find a chance to teach this guy a lesson, lest he rebels in the future. At this time, Xiao Ta hesitated and then said, Young lord, I was just joking. Yi Xian said with a smile, Xiao Ta, I still don't know what changes have happened to you. Xiao Ta was silent. Yi Xian was a little curious. What's wrong? Xiao Ta sighed softly. Young lord, I have to keep a low profile. I used to talk too much, and then, at this point, it stopped talking. Yi Xian wanted to say something else, but at this time, a white light suddenly appeared in front of him and Zhong Bai. Boom! With a roar in their ears, the two appeared in a stretch of ruins. Yi Xian scanned the surroundings. At this moment, he and Zhongbai were in the center of a wasteland. Everywhere around them were broken fences and broken walls. Above their heads floated a thick, black cloud that was incomparably stifling. And in the distant sky, there were still some remnants of swords floating. Swords. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Could it be that this was once a swordsman sect? As if he felt something, he suddenly turned his head. In the distance, a few hundred zhang away, there was a stone tablet that was hundreds of zhang long, and on the stone tablet, there was a sword. At this time, Yi Xian's eyes fell on the sword. The sword was 4 feet long, 2 fingers wide, and it was completely black. At this time, Zhongbai suddenly said, "Be careful." Yi Xian nodded. He looked at the stone tablet in the distance and said, "Let's go and have a look." Zhongbai nodded. The two walked toward the stone tablet. On the way, Yi Xian glanced around, as if he discovered something. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his left thumb lightly pressed against the green profound sword. Zhongbai slowly clenched his right hand. Soon, the two walked in front of the stone tablet. Yi Xian looked at the stone tablet. On the stone tablet, there were 3 big words, Demon Sword Sect. Demon Sword Sect. Yi Xian whispered, "It really is a swordsman sect." It had been a long time since he had seen the swordsman sect. Zhongbai said softly, "There must have been a great battle here." Yi Xian nodded. He looked up at the black sword at the top of the stone tablet. He opened his palm. "Come." The black sword did not move. There was no reaction. Yi Xian was stunned. In the next moment, his right hand lightly twirled. "Come." The black sword still did not budge. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. "What the hell?" Zhongbai looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian's old face turned slightly red. He suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of the black sword. He sized up the black sword and frowned, because he couldn't see what was so special about it. Yi Xian held the black sword in his hand. Boom! As soon as he held it, Yi Xian's pupils shrank. In the next moment, his eyes turned pitch black. In an instant, a cloud of black energy erupted from his body. Then, his body began to corrode bit by bit. Shocked, Yi Xian hurriedly activated his armor. Rumble. As soon as the armor appeared, the cloud of black energy was blocked. However, he was shocked to find that the insides of his body were still being corroded. The armor was blocking the outside, not the inside. Yi Xian hurriedly calmed down and activated his bloodline power. Boom! In an instant, the blood in Yi Xian's body began to boil. Very soon, a terrifying bloodline power erupted from his body. Along with this bloodline, following the eruption of this bloodline power, the black energy in his body was slowly suppressed. Seeing this, Yi Xian immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, the black sword suddenly trembled violently. A moment later, it struggled free from Yi Xian's grasp and stabbed towards the center of his forehead. Yi Xian didn't dodge and allowed it to stab into his forehead. Right at the instant that the black sword was about to stab into the center of Yi Xian's forehead, a hand suddenly grabbed the blade of the sword. It was Zhongbai. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through Zhongbai's eyes. She swiftly grabbed the black sword and tossed it to the side. As soon as the sword left her hand, her right palm split into 2. At the instant that the black sword flew out, it suddenly turned around and stabbed towards the center of Zhongbai's forehead. Zhongbai's eyes narrowed slightly. She was just about to attack when a ray of light suddenly slashed against the black sword. Bang! An expanse of light erupted, and then both swords were blasted flying. Yi Xian appeared by Zhongbai's side. Zhongbai gazed at the black sword with a solemn expression on her face. That sword is terrifying. Yi Xian glanced at Zhongbai's severed hand and said, "Recuperate first." Zhongbai nodded slightly. She withdrew a medicinal pill and consumed it. However, it was utterly useless. Moreover, she noticed to her astonishment that her palm was being corroded bit by bit. Zhong Bai frowned at the sight of this. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly grabbed Zhong Bai's arm, and then a strand of his bloodline energy surged into Zhong Bai's arm. Bang! A ray of blood-red light swept through Zhong Bai's arm, and then the remaining black energy around Zhong Bai's injury vanished. Yi Xian relaxed his grip and spoke softly, "It's fine now." Zhong Bai gazed at Yi Xian with astonishment in her eyes. "Your bloodline energy." In that instant just now, she'd clearly sensed Yi Xian's bloodline energy. It was too terrifying. Yi Xian grinned. "Have you heard of the bloodline of the Mad Demon clan?" Zhong Bai shook her head. Yi Xian smiled, and then he gazed towards the distance. At this moment, the green profound sword had entered into battle with the black sword. Yi Xian suddenly noticed that the green profound sword's ability in one-on-one combat was very formidable, and it wasn't just ordinarily formidable. Of course, the black sword was quite terrifying as well. After all, the green profound sword could be said to be the number one sword beneath the three swords, yet this black sword was actually able to fight the green profound sword equally. At this moment, the black sword in the distance suddenly trembled violently. In an instant, thousands of strands of sword chi swept out from within it. Hiss! Tens of thousands of holes were torn in the sky. The green profound sword suddenly trembled slightly, and then it transformed into a ray of light that shot forward. It broke through the enemy's defenses with a single point. Rumble! A ray of light suddenly exploded in the distant sky, and in the blink of an eye, the two swords were sent flying several tens of thousands of meters away. Wherever the two swords passed, space-time was torn inch by inch, and the entire sky was directly torn into a huge spider web. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Yi Xian looked at the black sword with a slight frown, and his heart was filled with shock. Just where did this sword come from, and how could it actually block the green profound sword? At this moment, the black sword suddenly trembled violently, and in the next moment, the space-time in front of Yi Xian directly split apart, and then a sword directly stabbed towards the center of Yi Xian's brows. It was the black sword. To catch bandits, first catch the king. Yi Xian was stunned. This sword was very thoughtful, and actually knew to catch bandits by first catching the king. Watch out! Zhong Bai's voice suddenly rang out in Yi Xian's ears, and in the next moment, the hilt of the black sword was directly grabbed by a hand. It was Zhong Bai's hand, and at this moment, the black sword had already left Yi Xian's brows. It was less than half an inch away from Yi Xian's brows. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through Zhong Bai's eyes. She grabbed the black sword and tossed it towards the side. At the same time, she suddenly charged forward and smashed her fist forward. Rumble! A terrifying fist seal slammed into the black sword, and the black sword was blasted several thousand feet away. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through Zhong Bai's eyes. She seemed to have thought of something, and she turned around to look at Yi Xian with slight anger. "Why didn't you resist? Could it be that you don't know how dangerous this sword is?" Yi Xian was just about to speak when the black sword suddenly turned around and vanished into the horizon. It fled? Zhong Bai's brows knit together slightly. Yi Xian glanced at the sky, and his brows knit together slightly as well. That sword really does possess some ability, and its origins are extraordinary. Zhong Bai pointed towards the distance. "Look." Yi Xian looked along the direction of Zhong Bai's finger. Chapter 2368. The spear stabbed forward. Yi Xian was speechless. Did this idiot know that he could absorb swords? He still did not dodge and allowed the spear to stab him between his eyebrows. Boom! A spear gleam suddenly erupted from between his eyebrows. The terrifying force caused Yi Xian's entire body to tremble. However, Yi Xian was completely unscathed. He had forcefully withstood all the force of the spear. Zhong Bai was completely stunned when he saw this. At this moment, the spear suddenly retreated and widened the distance between it and Yi Xian. The spear trembled slightly and returned to its sword form. Yi Xian looked at Black Sword. That's it? Black Sword suddenly flew into a rage. How dare you! Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm and the Qingxian sword appeared in his hand. The next moment, he wielded the sword and slashed forward. Boom! In the distance, Black Sword was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. As soon as he stopped, the Qingxian sword stabbed him again. Boom! Black Sword was sent flying again. This time, he flew hundreds of thousands of feet away. After Black Sword stopped, he slashed at him again. Boom! A wave of sword gleam exploded and Black Sword was sent flying. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm and the Qingxian sword appeared in his hand. In the distance, Black Sword suddenly roared angrily, 2 against 1, what kind of man are you? 2 against 1. Yi Xian was speechless. He glanced at Black Sword. Let your master come out. Black Sword said fiercely, my master has fallen. If he hadn't fallen, a swordsman like you would have died in no time. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Dead? As he said this, he shook his head slightly. It seems that your master is very weak. He actually died. Black Sword suddenly roared, what do you know? Do you know how powerful he is? You have no idea, you. Yi Xian said, he's dead. Whatever you say is useless. Black Sword was speechless. At the side, Zhong Bai could not help but laugh. Yi Xian continued, a truly powerful swordsman will never die, just like me. Black Sword's entire body trembled, swordsman, you dare despise my master. Yi Xian nodded. I dare. If you're not convinced, let him resurrect and beat me up. Black Sword said angrily, you. Are you talking like a human? He had already fallen. Your words are so shameless. Yi Xian laughed and said, I'm shameless, hee hee. Black Sword was speechless. Zhong Bai, little fellow, you're quite interesting. At that moment, a middle-aged man slowly walked out from the floating palace. The Black Sword flew in front of the middle-aged man. Master. Zhong Bai's expression instantly became extremely solemn when he saw the middle-aged man. Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man in silence. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and finally stopped at the Dedeabi on Yi Xian's waist. He chuckled. Dedeabi. Yi Xian nodded. The middle-aged man then looked at the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand. A trace of solemnity and complexity appeared in his eyes when he saw the azure sword. At that moment, Zhong Bai suddenly said, you are? The middle-aged man smiled. The sect leader of the demon sword sect. Zhong Bai frowned slightly. I've never heard of you. The middle-aged man smiled. It's normal that you've never heard of me. The demon sword sect has been around for at least 100 million years. Things have remained the same, but people have changed after 100 million years. 100 million years. Yi Xian was quite shocked. There were already such terrifying powerhouses 100 million years ago. This meant that the martial arts civilization of that era was already very advanced. The middle-aged man suddenly looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, shall we have a spar? Yi Xian nodded. Okay. The middle-aged man smiled. Be careful. As soon as he said that, the space-time in front of Yi Xian suddenly split open. The next moment, before Yi Xian could react, a sword had pierced his chest. Boom! Yi Xian's body trembled violently, and the armor on his body caved in. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he retreated thousands of meters. When he stopped, he looked at his chest. The armor on his chest had caved in. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression became solemn. Although this sword didn't break Arya's armor, the power of this sword was enough to damage Arya's armor. At this moment, the middle-aged man suddenly chuckled. Your armor is so powerful. Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. Your sword is also powerful. The middle-aged man smiled. Again. You have to be careful. As soon as he said that, he took a step forward. As soon as this step fell, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank, and he blocked with his sword. Rumble. His right arm trembled violently. In the next moment, Yi Xian was horrified because he discovered that a terrifying force had directly penetrated into his body through his armor. Bang! Yi Xian flew thousands of meters away. When he stopped, a trace of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. There was a trace of seriousness in Yi Xian's eyes. His opponent's sword technique was so strange that it could penetrate his armor. In the distance, the middle-aged man smiled. Again? Yi Xian looked up and smiled. Of course. As soon as he finished speaking, the armor on his body disappeared with a thought. There was no armor. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. Are you sure you want to do this? Without that armor, my sword technique can easily break your body. Yi Xian smiled. Bring it on. As soon as he said that, he opened his palm, and the azure sword appeared in his hand. In the next moment, bang! A terrifying sword intent suddenly shot into the sky from his body. The middle-aged man frowned slightly when he saw the sword intent. Your sword intent. In the distance, Yi Xian smiled, be careful. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared on the spot. Hiss! A sharp tearing sound suddenly resounded. In the distance, the middle-aged man's expression was calm as he casually stabbed with his sword. Bang! A wave of sword light suddenly exploded in front of them. In the next moment, the middle-aged man retreated a few hundred meters, but he didn't stop and slashed with his sword again. This attack was even faster than the previous one. A trace of astonishment flashed across the middle-aged man's eyes. With a flick of his wrist, he thrust his sword out. The sword was light, like a leaf falling slowly in the wind. However, when the sword struck Yi Xian's sword, it suddenly changed. The originally light sword suddenly turned into a violent storm. Bang! In front of the two, a beam of sword light suddenly exploded. The next moment, Yi Xian had already retreated thousands of feet away. As soon as he stopped, the space-time between his eyebrows suddenly cracked, and then a sword was already half an inch away from his eyebrows. The scene froze. Did I lose? No. Yi Xian's Qingxian sword had pierced the hilt of the black sword at some point in time, forcefully blocking the black sword. Yi Xian shook his wrist. Bang! A wave of sword intent surged out, and the black sword was instantly shattered. Flying. The middle-aged man opened his palm, and the black sword appeared in his hand. At the instant he held the black sword, he retreated a few meters. A wisp of surprise flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes, and he gazed at Yi Xian. Young man, your sword intent is amazing. Yi Xian grinned, Senior, you're too kind. The middle-aged man shook his head, I'm not. Your sword intent is extremely amazing, and it contains your sword Dao. Your sword Dao's future is limitless. Yi Xian smiled and said, thank you. The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian while a wisp of praise flashed through his eyes. Little fellow, I'll attack again. If you're able to block it without relying on any external objects, then I'll give you fortune. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and then the black sword in his hand shot into the sky. Yi Xian looked up into the sky, and the black sword suddenly started trembling violently. The middle-aged man suddenly smiled and said, Little fellow, you can do it. As soon as he finished speaking, his pupils suddenly turned black, and then he opened his right hand and swiftly pulled it down, life obliteration. Bang! A terrifying strand of black sword intent suddenly shot into the sky and entered the black sword. In an instant, a terrifying and evil aura instantly swept through the entire world. Zhong Bai's pupils constricted, and she hurriedly retreated explosively. Her eyes were filled with astonishment as she gazed at the black sword. What evil sword intent? Meanwhile, the middle-aged man suddenly started laughing, the most evil in the world. As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed his fingers together and pointed at Yi Xian, slash. Hiss. The black sword suddenly slashed down from the sky, and it seemed as if it intended to tear the entire universe into pieces. The sword contained the most evil sword intent. Down below, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. He opened his palm, and the Qingxian sword trembled violently. At the same time, streams of terrifying mortal sword will gushed out of his body and converged into the Qingxian sword like a river. In the next moment, the Qingxian sword soared into the sky like a torrent of mortal sword will. Kindness. There was kindness amidst the sword intent in the world. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire sky trembled violently. A black and white light from the sword abruptly exploded, instantly engulfing the entire sky. The cyan profound sword and the black sword were locked in a stalemate. The two swords trembled violently, and terrifying bursts of power continued to erupt. The world began to turn illusory bit by bit. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man suddenly pressed his right hand down slowly. The black sword trembled violently before a strand of terrifying energy erupted from it, and then the green profound sword was gradually forced back. Yi Xian gazed silently at the green profound sword that was being forced back. Kindness can't suppress evil. The evil within the sword intent grew stronger and stronger while the light around the green profound sword grew dimmer and dimmer. At this moment, the kindness sword intent was gradually vanishing as well. It was being suppressed. The black sword's imposing aura grew more and more terrifying, and the green profound sword was at an absolute disadvantage. It wasn't that the green profound sword was no match for the black sword, it was because the kindness sword intent was no match for the evil sword intent. Yi Xian had a trace of bewilderment in his eyes. All the ancient books he'd read said that evil could never defeat good, but was it really like that? Most of the time, evil was stronger than good. At this moment, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and looked into the sky. When good can't do anything, then let evil save all living beings. As soon as he finished speaking, boom. Within Yi Xian's body, the power of his bloodline suddenly shot into the sky. Within this power of his bloodline, there was a strand of terrifying sword intent that had been sealed for a long time. Evil sword intent. At this moment, the power of his bloodline was undergoing a change. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.